Ugh. 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 Da 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 da. I did absolutely nothing today. Like nothing. 0%. I literally woke up. My ex came and dropped Milo off, and so Milo will no doubt make an appearance. Right? He shall reappear among us and walk among us. Hello there, Major. How are you doing today, bud? Good to see you. And then literally, I went back to bed. No, I got some food. Right, I got a pizza, so I didn't even make food. It's like the laziest possible day. I actually feel like, you know how conservatives accuse people of being lazy, and they're like, you gotta bootstrap yourself and set your mind down into the ground so that you can stand up straight and fight for the things you want if you want to do well. And I feel guilty, like on that kind of a level, for how just extremely lazy I have been today. And you know what? I don't care. I don't care at all. If God can take a day off, so can I. God damn it, right? On the seventh day he rested. Well, this is my seventh day, and I am resting, and it's great. I hope you guys are resting out there. I hope you guys are having a really good time. I hope that everybody should rest, right? Everybody should rest. I mean, Justin Trudeau seems to think so, right? Canada announces a national holiday to mark Queen Elizabeth's death, which, fun fact, if you live here in Ontario, Doug Ford said, nah. Isn't that great? Isn't it great that we have an elected leadership that's so, like, how do you miss on this one? You know? How do you miss on this one? The Prime Minister of Canada says we're going to do a national holiday. We're gonna mark the death of the Queen with a national holiday. And here's a moment where everybody in Canada gets to go like, oh, that's nice. Isn't that nice? We have an elected leadership that doesn't do anything for us except now finally we're getting a day off. Well, that's nice. And then you come in as the premier and go, nah, we'll do a moment of silence at 1 p.m. on that day. Like, shut up. Like, shut up. That's so stupid. Like, it's so stupid. What a fucking loser this guy is. What a loser our premier is. Doug Ford can't even, like, slam dunk on this, like, it's so easy. Like, it's so easy. All you had to do is go, oh yeah, okay. And just like, yeah, the Queen died, right? Anybody who's like pro-Queen is going to be like, oh, pro-Queen, yay, hooray, right? And then anybody who's not is still going to be like, oh, sick, day off, right? Like, it pleases everyone across every spectrum. It makes everyone happy except one very specific group of people. And we know exactly who that extremely small, tiny little minority of people are, which are, as always, the psychotic wealthy, right? Just a group of people who are sitting there being like, well, they shouldn't get a day off. That's going to cost me an extra 0.02835 cents on Monday. Like, just like the most stingy, miserly, tight-fisted losers. Just total fucking Scrooge McDucks up in here. And we're all just supposed to be like, oh yeah, okay, I guess. You know, whatever, it's just the Queen, you know? It's just the Queen, and a day off given by the literal Prime Minister of our country, you know? You know what, maybe the next Queen. Maybe we'll get a day off with the next Queen. But, like, what do you expect? You know? What do you fucking expect? We're living in this, like, absolutely brain dead society where just, like, do good things ever happen? Well, I have a report here that could possibly be actually, potentially, good news. Hold on a second here, guys. Do we believe it is possible? Is it possible that something good could happen? This is something that I think about a lot these days, actually. Is it possible that good things can happen? Is it possible, Milo? Do you think good things can happen? Right? I mean, every day's a good day for Milo. You get treats, you get little snacks, right? You get pets, right? And so when an article comes through that has something like this, where it says Trudeau announces $4.5 billion inflation relief package for low earners, I get extremely suspicious, right? Because I have learned through the years that every single time I go, oh, that's good. Oh, that might be good news. That there's always like a catch. There's always some kind of thing. There's always some kind of like little hanging chad that just undercuts the whole thing and ruins the whole operation, right? And I don't know why this would be any different. You know what I mean? Payments to offset sales tax and $500 top-up to help with rent. That would be nice. Wouldn't that be nice? I could use an extra $500 top-up to help with rent. Right? Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced $4.5 billion in measures on Tuesday intended to provide relief from high inflation to low-income families. Right? Oh, so maybe I just don't qualify. I'm not a low-income family. Right? A measure is included doubling a quarterly tax credit sent to individuals and families with low and modest incomes to offset sales tax, and a $500 one-time top-up to a housing benefit that is provided to low earners who need help with rent. Oh, okay. So like a one-time top-up. So probably what that is that there is a program here in Canada that if you can't pay rent, you get to apply for this program, but it's money that you have to pay back, right? So you take it out, and then they'll take it out of your sales, of your tax later on. So like 1 year I actually had to use this program where I was just like a little bit short. I couldn't quite make it, so I went through the process of applying for it. It's an enormous pain in the ass, right? They make it an enormous pain in the ass on purpose. And I got the thing, and then they take it out of your pay as you go along, right? And they take it out of your taxes as you go along. And so they've probably just like increased the amount you can take out. That's all. So, big fucking whoop. When we're sitting here being like, hey, we should nationalize rent. Like, we should nationalize systems. We should get rid of these private psychopaths. Right? These guys are walking around being like, we're going to increase the amount that you can get relief by 0.3%. And that's, we're all supposed to be like, oh, thank goodness Mr. Trudeau is here to protect us. Thank goodness Mr. Trudeau is here to protect us from all of this. Yeah. Trudeau's Liberal government will also provide up to $650 per year for dental care to children under 12 who do not have access to dental insurance. I do want to put this out there and say outright, that's good. Like that, yeah, that's good. Like, we can complain that it's not enough, and it's not enough. And we can complain that it's not for everybody, and it isn't for everybody. It's for children under 12. But, you know, yeah, all right. Like, I mean, Stephen Harper did a childcare benefit, you know? Stephen Harper actually gave, like, thousands of dollars to families with children under age of 12. So this actually makes the Trudeau Liberal government more stingy than the Harper Conservatives. But okay, you know, it's not zero. right? It's not nothing completely. And I do think that Justin Trudeau is feeling heat from the Poilievre election. I think that people are looking at Poilievre as a legitimate threat, and that they see him not as, like, he's not this milquetoast banal loser the way that O'Toole or Scheer were, right? Like, he seems to have galvanized an energy, and you listen to his rhetoric, and it sounds very effective. That he's tapping in to the anger and the frustration of the populace. And that anger and that frustration, the Trudeau government is not really doing anything to ameliorate or address or take very seriously. And if Trudeau's not careful, he's going to lose this next election. And he's going to lose it because he's walking around doing these, like, tiny little incrementalist, like, small scale reformist bullshit the way that liberals do. And people are telling him it's not enough. It's not working, right? It's not working for us. And it's not working for us. Like, all of our money has evaporated, right? Like, we're poorer than than the previous generation, right? Like, and it's just getting obvious. Like, it's just getting obvious that the Trudeau Liberals are not really trying to help out. And these small, little, tiny, incrementalist things. Yeah, and Nova Scotia's absolutely right. Good to see you, by the way, bud. One hand giveth, the other hand taketh away, right? Like, it's just getting clearer and clearer that the Trudeau Liberals don't work for you, right? They don't work for you. And so the populace, in desperation, more than anything, if you ask me, like, I don't think that people are swinging to the Conservatives because they're like, wow, yeah, Conservatives are really going to help us out. I think they're desperate and they don't know what else to do, right? And they're not really convinced that the NDP are a viable option. And I think people are sick and tired of seeing this fucking Trudeau loser. While inflation cooled a bit in July from almost a 4-decade high of 8.1%, the Bank of Canada is still concerned about rising prices and is promising further interest rate hikes after increasing them to their highest level in 14 years last week. I absolutely adore how just like they're just repeating this fairly oblique lie at this point. The interest rate doesn't have anything to do with inflation. The two are not linked in any meaningful way. That what inflation is, it's impacted by two things, right? One, if you print money, right, it creates inflation. That's true. Like, that's but the Trudeau Liberals have not printed enough money to account for an inflation rate of 8.1%, right? Like, really think about that. Like, has the Trudeau Liberals increased the money supply by 8%? Have they been printing, like, that's literally, like, trillions of dollars that they would have to be printing. They're not doing it to that scale. So you have to look at what's the second thing that impacts inflation. Well, that's just corporations raising prices. That's all that is, right? Corporations raise prices, and you are just told to deal with it, right? Very simply. And they come up with all kinds of excuses as to why they're raising prices, but the reality is that their profit margin is higher than it's ever been, right? Their profits aren't stagnating, right? They're not even losing money, right? Like, if they were even plateauing, or even if the profits were thinning, right, this narrative of theirs could be a little bit more believable. But that's not what's happening, right? And we're seeing it over and over again. They're just raising prices. And the Trudeau Liberals are covering for them. That's what this lie does, is that it covers for them. It lets them pretend as though, this is just like world events, like moving about, this has happened, and the global economy is doing, oh my God, all this kind of stuff. When it really is as simple as the oligarchy going, raise prices, get more money out of these people. It is that simple. It's price fixing at the highest possible level. And the government of Canada, the Trudeau Liberals, are covering for it. And they point to, we're going to raise the interest rate, right? And that's going to get inflation under control. But what raising the interest rate is actually going to do is it's just going to bankrupt a bunch of smaller players, or at least force those smaller players out of the economy, right? Out of the market. And it's going to force a certain type of pricing to go down, which is housing, right? It's going to force a certain realignment of certain goods to change. But all that means is that the only people who will be able to buy those assets, well, are the rich. That's it. So they're lowering the prices for the oligarchy to be able to pick up goods and assets, while simultaneously convincing you that the reason they're doing this is to combat the prices that are raised by the very oligarchy that they're raising the interest rate to benefit in the first place. Like, the whole thing is a fucking grift. It's an enormous grift that's being played right in front of your eyes. And the reason why they can do it and get away with it is because nobody actually understands how an economy works anymore, if they ever did in the first place. And we're trained to be illiterate on this subject. We're trained not to know anything. And so people just unquestioningly go like, well, they're raising the interest rate, and that will get inflation under control. Probably not. Probably not. Right? They have no incentive whatsoever to lower prices. They have no incentive whatsoever to stabilize these markets or stabilize any of this stuff. They want cheap assets and they want your money. It's very straightforward. And the Trudeau Liberals are happy to deliver. Derek Holt, head of capital markets economics at Scotiabank, right? So, certainly the guy who you should absolutely trust, who's absolutely not just trying to grift you for your money, right? Expects the stimulus will start being spent in the first and second quarter of 2023. I would expect this to add inflationary pressures into the start of the year, he said, adding that he anticipates it will increase the pressures on the Bank of Canada to go over 4% with its policy rate. They're outright admitting it, right? So here's the head of capital markets at economics at Scotiabank, right? I would expect this to add inflationary pressures. So the oligarchy is going to raise its prices more. Why? Because, we gave more money to people. Oh, you have $500? We want that $500. That's it. It's as simple as that, right? That they're just jacking prices because they know you have a little bit more money. That's it. The support package includes money previously allocated in the budget and $3.1 billion in additional funding, which was earlier reported by Reuters, citing a government source last week. The payment to low-income renters and children's dental care plans are part of an agreement Trudeau made with the opposition New Democratic Party in March in exchange for its support to keep its minority government in power until 2025. The setting up of a national dental care system was one of the keystones of the agreement, and Trudeau said his government was planning to expand dental benefits to more people by the end of next year, with the full program completed by 2025. I know so many families are overwhelmed by the soaring cost of groceries, rent, and gas, so this help right away is crucial, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh said in a statement after Trudeau's announcement. And absolutely nobody just saying, incarcerate these guys, right? Just stand up, say out loud in front of the populace, if you raise prices, we are coming for you, and watch what happens. Watch what happens, right? Isn't it crazy how if a small group of people block a bridge, we're going to evoke the Emergencies Measures Act, and we're gonna incarcerate people and cause a whole kerfuffle and a big problem. But if major massive corporations jack their prices systemically and consistently over and over again, Oh yes, that's just how it is. It's just totally fine, right? Like it and the populace is just gullibly slurping it up, right? We're just gullibly going along with this idea that the Trudeau Liberals are at all interested in confronting these inflationary pressures. They're really not. And for real, like they're passing a bill like this. We're gonna give money to people and help them out, and straight up, the head of capital markets economics is just like, yeah, it's just going to increase inflation because we know they have more money, so we're just going to raise prices again because that's what we're doing. We're raising prices. Why? So that we can get more money. It's very, 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 very straightforward, right? If Canada runs its budget like a single mom, the Excel file would be huge. I don't know if I understand that, Major, but okay. Yep, more like stand and deliver. Like, the Liberals are making it very clear who they work for, and it isn't you. They're not working in your interests whatsoever. And these itsy bitsy, tiny little piecemeal reform kind of things that they're doing are not even close to enough. Not even close to enough, right? John, good to see you, bud. And if you ask me, the NDP just look extremely weak in all of this. Like, how cheaply their support is sold, right? They're not putting the Liberals' feet to the fire. They're not burning people. Like, they're not trying to actually fundamentally empower workers or change the system or any of this. Like, they're not suggesting anything serious. Like, this is as, like, I would assume a government would want to do these kinds of things. This is how kind of bad it's gotten for us here in Canada. This is how childish and small-minded we are. Is that I'm sitting here going, like, wouldn't any government with any sense want to be doing these sorts of things just as a byproduct of its existence? Like, shouldn't any government be standing there going, yeah, we want to ensure that our populace has access to services that will improve its life, right? To improve the life of the mass of the public. Shouldn't that be just like a byproduct of the existence of the government? That we're looking at here, like $650 for dental care for kids, and I'm like, yeah, like I'm literally not going to pat any government on the back for that. I'm not going to wave a flag or I'm not celebrating it. It's like, yeah, that I consider that doing your job. It's like the most basic function of government, if you ask me, that people have access to services to improve the quality of their life. And if a government gets in and it does, and its goal is to do the opposite of that, well, then you don't really need to follow it. You don't need to pay attention to it outside of how dangerous it is for you. So like the Ford government, like Ford's not a serious politician. He's not a serious person. And the people who vote for him are deluded, out of touch, like boomer types, right? Like if once the economic collapses begin to take hold in very big and serious ways, having a man like Doug Ford in power is it's incredibly dangerous, right? Because guys like this come up with solutions like, let's round up the Jews. Like, that's the kind of shit that these guys come up with. Like, they're not going to come up with solutions like, hey, maybe we should actually do something to help the mass of the public, right? Like, that's not what they're interested in. And guys like this, like Trudeau, is going to be faced with a serious challenge in this next upcoming election. Poilievre is very effective, right? He's a very effective storyteller, right? Doesn't matter if he's telling the truth. People don't care about that. Like, we've seen it over and over again. Canadians vote for the most effective liar. And Poilievre is a very effective liar, right? I once ran an Excel sheet for groceries and gas. Saved 20% more money. There you go. There you go. Yeah, I guess I'm just not hip with the kids with the Microsoft Excel jokes, I gotta tell you. So, let's move into international politics, let's call it. Statement condemning the OHCHR's assessment of human rights concern in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, People's Republic of China. Did I see the Pierre presser today? I think I caught a glimpse of it. I don't know if I've got anything from it. Did anything significant happen, Adam? The following statement has been initiated by Friends of Socialist China. You can add your name as an individual signatory using Google Forms, etc., etc. We strongly condemn the publication of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and its assessment of human rights concern in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, People's Republic of China. In the words of former OHCHR lawyer and human rights expert Alfred DeZeus, this document should be discarded as propagandistic, biased, and methodologically flawed. Based on substandard research methods and biased sources, the assessment is completely lacking in credibility. It treats arms of the military-industrial complex, such as the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, along with professional anti-communists, such as Adrian Zenz, as legitimate sources. Meanwhile, the voices of Chinese NGOs, academics, and individuals are suppressed, as are numerous reports of diplomatic trips to Xinjiang, included by representatives of Muslim-majority countries, that have taken place in recent years. Yeah, here you go, bud. We got somebody saying we can link it. There you go. The assessment pointedly ignores China's extraordinary progress in promoting the human rights of all ethnic groups in Xinjiang in relation to poverty alleviation, social welfare, economic development, safety from terrorist attacks, and more. Instead, the document uses deliberately ambiguous language that China's actions may constitute crimes against humanity in order to slander the People's Republic of China whilst maintaining some plausible deniability. It is highly suspicious that the assessment makes no mention of the then UN Human Rights Commissioner Michelle Bachelet's visit to Xinjiang in May 2022. Having visited a prison and spoken to former trainees at a vocational education and training center, having interacted with civil society organizations, academics, and community and religious leaders, Bachelet found no evidence of crimes against humanity. The numerous conversations she had do not form part of the data set for the assessment. What is the reason for the disparity between the OHCHR report and Bachelet's end-of-mission statement? It is painfully obvious that the OHCHR has come under intense pressure from the U.S. to bolster the credibility of the lurid slanders that have been thrown at China by the Western politicians and journalists. Such propaganda forms part of the West's imperial agenda of undermining China. The OHCHR's assessment does have a profound disservice to the cause of strengthening global human rights cooperation. The report does not enjoy a mandate from the General Assembly or the Human Rights Council, and it runs counter to the wishes and interests of the mainstream of the international community. A joint statement delivered by Cuba at the 50th session of the Human Rights Council in June this year stated its firm opposition to the politicization of human rights and double standards or interference in China's internal affairs under the pretext of human rights. This statement was signed by 69 countries, the overwhelming majority from the global south. Given the OHCHR's relative silence in relation to persistent human rights abuses by the imperialist powers, it is impossible to avoid the conclusion that the assessment is politically motivated, produced under pressure from the U.S., and designed to contribute to a dangerous, escalating, new Cold War. We call on the OHCHR to withdraw its assessment, and we stand in solidarity with the people of China, subjected to abhorrent and baseless accusations. Hey, Cotton, how you doing? That's okay. I know everybody can't always be here all the time, man. That's how it is. I'm used to it. It's good. It's good that it's just good of you to think of me, man. That's so nice. That's so kind of you. So, and initial signatories, right? The Communist Party of Britain, Freedom Road Socialists. I'm not going to read all of these out, but you can see down the list. A lot of Socialist Unity Party, a lot of communists, right? A lot of communists. No fucking shit. A lot of people who are just like, yeah, this is fucking bullshit. And my own feeling on this assessment, this document that came out of the UN, is mainly disappointment. I'm extremely disappointed by it because I was really looking forward to it. I was really looking forward to Michelle Bachelet's trip. I was so happy to see that she went there, and when she came out, she was saying, I'm not seeing anything here that she wasn't confirming any stories of human rights abuses or anything like that. And I was really looking forward to this document because I do want a credible investigation, right? I want to see an organization like the UN, right, go into China and do a credible investigation. And I was really hoping and looking forward to seeing this. But then to find out that it's just covered in CIA sources, fucking they directly source Adrian Zenz in the document. Like, I'm sorry, man. Like, if you're directly sourcing Adrian Zenz in your document's like, I can't trust you. It's that simple. Like, I literally cannot trust the document because you are willfully attaching such overt frauds as Adrian Zenz to the project. Like, it just means you don't have any sense or care, right? You're not actually attempting to build a credible case. You are just interested in building a political propaganda piece. And it sucks because I want an investigation, right? Yeah, the fact that they include the CIA speaks volumes. Like, why would they? Why would anyone ever think that it is intelligent at all to source the CIA while doing an investigation of this sort, right? Like, the global south, so i.e. the vast majority of the rest of the world, is never going to accept a document that is sourced, that has CIA sourcing. They're never going to accept it. So why do it? Why do it? And the only reason to do it is so that you can have this document that comes out of the UN, right? The official, like, Human Rights Council of the UN that condemns China. That's the reason you do it. And it doesn't matter if it's credible. It doesn't matter if it's... And also, it's extremely disappointing to find out how far the reach of the CIA goes. That the CIA and the United States propaganda machine has infected even the UN to this degree. That, like, it means it makes our job so much harder. It makes our work so much more difficult. Like, so much more difficult. It means that we can't trust anything that comes out of this organization any longer. Like, that's the real truth of it. And it's heartbreaking to me because this was an organization, like the whole Look at Venezuela grift that was going on for about a year, where people were like, oh, socialism doesn't work, look at Venezuela, right? That was the whole thing. Well, the UN, this organization, released a report that essentially destroyed that. It completely, like, and it stopped. The propaganda machine that was constantly repeating, look at Venezuela, stopped. Because the UN released a report saying, yeah, it's not socialism. Like, it's the sanctions. It's the sanction regime that's causing these problems. And so, I'm a bit heartbroken about it, you know? I feel like it's like losing a sword. It's like when you followed somebody and you actually thought that they were, like, good and respectful and that you could trust them, and then very steadily you just watch them cease being trustworthy and you watch it happen, you know? I've had that happen before. Someone like Stephen Colbert was like that, right? Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart, to me, were like that, where initially, like when I was younger, I was very much like, what these guys say is absolutely like they're fighting for the truth and all of this. And then as I get older and as I learn more, right, basically I come to see that, oh, these guys are still very pro-imperialist, and like they are more than willing to platform just extremely hawkish, far-right positions that completely maintain the imperial narrative, right? Like, for God's sakes, I remember one time in Jon Stewart's new stuff, like the problem with Jon Stewart. He interviews a bunch of people from all over, and he straight up just platforms like Juan Guaido thugs pretending as though Maduro is a dictator in Venezuela. And it just like completely like no pushback, no attempt to do any of that kind of stuff. And so that was very heartbreaking to me to realize that, like, while Stewart has something interesting to say domestically, he's essentially an imperialist, right? And isn't really interested to challenge the empire in that regard. I think there's a reason for that. Like, he's probably aware that if he did that, he would be deplatformed pretty quickly. Major says it was scary to learn that we could hardly even trust the IAEA to tell the truth. What's the IAEA? I'm blanking on it. I'll probably look this up and immediately be like, the International Atomic Energy Agency. What have they been up to? Oh, hey. The IAEA Director General statement on the situation in Ukraine. Is this going to lead us to something really crazy? Oh, it's like, yeah, we're repairing the plant. We're not going to have another Chernobyl. One hopes that we don't have another Chernobyl, which is worth bringing up considering the next thing that I've got here. Ukraine's counteroffensive. So, what's being reported all over the place right now is that Ukraine is gaining territory in Russia. And that is technically the truth. That Ukraine is gaining a little shred of territory and pushing the Russians back. They are attempting, I think it's 4 different offenses, 3 of which have been unsuccessful, and 1 of which experienced the most modest of success. Like, literally, they pushed into territory that the Russians had basically abandoned, and they're calling it, like, this enormous military victory and a sign that the Ukrainian offensive is a massive success and all this, when really it's like Russia being like, oh, we're going to take these troops and we're going to put them somewhere more vital and important to actually, you know, win this thing. And Ukraine is basically like, yeah, we came in and we got a couple of villages, and this is the greatest victory in the history of mankind, right? So this is from Rainer Shea, who's been fairly consistent. Ukraine's counteroffensive is a propaganda victory, not a strategic victory. The propaganda campaign that the imperialists are carrying out around Ukraine is a way of covering up how decrepit and discredited imperialism has truly become. When the imperialists portray Ukraine's recent counteroffensive as a crushing blow against Washington's challengers, they aren't just leaving out how the territories Ukraine took back were of little strategic importance, or how Russia has shown itself to be the one with the superior military advantage by prioritizing the minimization of their troop casualties over momentary control of soil. They're leaving out how Washington, by provoking Russia into war, has played a geopolitical chess move that's backfired on it. The sanctions were supposed to weaken Russia enough that it could be destabilized and balkanized, leaving China vulnerable to being subdued. This is proven to be an utter fantasy. The Russian economy hasn't been defeated because the country has been preparing for a full-scale sanctions scenario such as this one for years. Russia is coming out better than the US bloc is, able to avoid Europe's fate of catastrophic energy shortage and irrecoverable depression, when the US itself is having its inflation crisis accelerated by its own sanctions. By forcing the world to choose between it and the United States, Russia has further exposed Washington's declining hegemony, winning de facto or even enthusiastic support from the formerly colonized countries. The biggest loss for anti-imperialism that's come from this is that the Nordic countries have joined NATO, which ultimately has brought the imperialistic bloc further along in its decay. These countries were already practically NATO members anyway, and Russia has been able to take on these unambiguous enemies rather than provoke neutral countries or lose allies, which the US empire has itself become at risk of doing, roping the European countries into a wildly costly economic war that's causing dissension among them. As the Belt and Road Initiative continues to undo neocolonialism's inequities, and as growing global inequality leads to intensification of class struggle in the global south, especially, the imperialists are seeing their extractive economic base shrink. The prospect of strategically important global south countries like Ethiopia coming to stand on their own feet economically, the inability of imperialism to carry out coups throughout the Latin American anti-imperialist countries, the probability of a new wave of revolution sweeping the remaining neo-colonies during our generation, the global shift away from the dollar that the Russian sanctions have accelerated. It's all driving the imperialists to desperation. However much they can gain oil, weapons, and mercenary contractor profits from their wars, the US bourgeoisie can't keep their capital strong if neo-colonialism disappears. When the core's economic foundations of global exploitation fall out, our ruling class will take drastic measures to try to keep the system going. They'll take the tools for violence that they've been innovating within their fascist Ukraine project and turn these tools against their own people. It's already starting to happen. Neo-Nazi shooters in America are using the same symbols that Azov uses. We have the Proud Boys assaulting those who threaten Western chauvinism, like how Ukraine's fascists have been routinely beating communists since the coup 8 years ago. Our judicial system has set a precedent, letting reactionaries shoot at demonstrators, making for a repeat of Ukraine's Odessa massacre in 2014. The next time the U.S. empire's contradictions come to a breaking point, and its internal colonies are provoked into revolt, like they were in 2020, the fascists will try to apply the same treatment to those standing up for liberation. And our government, which is soon to be fully taken over by fascists, will give the bloodshed a patriotic stamp of approval. How are revolutionaries in the core to respond to this? By incorporating into our analysis the dual nature of our conditions. U.S. capital is weakening with the decline of imperialism, and at the same time our ruling class is working to strengthen the fascist movement in reaction to this situation. As Mao said, the reactionaries are both real tigers and paper tigers, both vulnerable to the forces of history and capable of inflicting vast harm for as long as they remain in power. Even in its last decade of decline, U.S. imperialism has been able to bring war back into Europe, impose neoliberal shock policies onto Ukraine while militarizing the broader region, and carry out parallel destabilization and militarization across the new Cold War's other fronts. It's funded an Azerbaijan invasion of Armenia, which is currently entering its initial phase, in order to try to split Russian forces. It's implemented further austerity within its neo-colonies and core countries during the pandemic, while tightening its sanctions. It's heightened the danger of nuclear war, and orchestrated censorship and propaganda campaigns which have manufactured public support for the escalations which create this danger. Yet all of these actions can't truly be considered victories, any more than the recent Ukraine counteroffensive can. They're the desperate things an empire does when it's in a state of irrecoverable decline. That's the key lesson we in the core can take from the imperialism's recent conduct abroad. The more imperiled our ruling class becomes, the more rashly it will act. We can see this in how Henry Kissinger, an ancient imperialist who views the world from the more pragmatic analytical lens that imperialism applied during his career 50 years ago, doesn't share the desire of the current imperialist leadership to uncompromisingly press forward in Ukraine. His style of sociopathy is different from that of the Biden administration and its NATO sycophants. He would decide to negotiate with Russia over territory, rather than draw out the conflict just for the sake of dealing some more negligibly harmful blows towards Russia. This is because he's reacted to U.S. hegemony's unraveling by coming to be concerned about disequilibrialism, i.e. a further loss of control for Washington due to Washington's taking ever more reckless and non-strategic actions. He sees the situation U.S. imperialism is in. If it responds to its decline in a reactive manner, then in pragmatic fashion, it will only end up sealing its fate. The current generation of imperialists won't heed his warning, because lashing out without forethought is what empires always do when confronted with their decline. If or when the revolutionary crisis in the United States escalates to the point of armed confrontation, our bourgeois dictatorship won't fight against us in accordance with sound military strategy. It will fight like the corrupt Kiev U.S. puppet regime has been fighting, by prioritizing momentary propaganda victories. Propaganda victories won through dramatic, yet strategically inconsequential actions, like taking relatively unimportant sections of territory. At least this is how it will act when it becomes desperate enough, which could happen sooner than one might assume. Again, these people are, in the end, paper tigers, however many weapons they have. Weapons are useless without troops to operate them, and that's why Ukraine is in an increasingly bad military situation, even though it now has more weapons than it did at the beginning of the conflict. Ukraine's armed forces are being depleted, so much that Zelensky is freeing convicted torturers and child rapists to fight. Given how dysfunctional and working-class populated America's armed forces are, plenty of defections could happen in a revolutionary scenario. This fact about reactionaries is why the president of Russia, which is the revolutionary actor in the context of this conflict, has responded to the recent counteroffensive by nonchalantly saying he's lost nothing. This event represents a turning point in the war only in the minds of the imperialists who believe their own propaganda. The emperor has no clothes. The process towards multipolarity, and then the end of Washington as an international player, can't be reversed by this, likely temporary, seizure of one stretch of land. Operation Z is about demilitarization, with control over land being secondary to taking away Kiev's tools for carrying out ethnic cleansing. And demilitarization is what's happening. This unwise, PR-obsessed maneuver by Kiev has even made it easier for Russia to further pick off Ukraine's forces, letting Russia separate the soldier from the civilians by bringing the combatants out into the open. There's another, not so optimistic facet to this story, one that I shouldn't omit. It's that though Ukraine's taking these territories hasn't represented a loss for Russia, it's represented untold horrors for the people who now live under the Kiev regime's brutal rule. The fascists, in their pathetic and desperate rage, will subject their captives to extrajudicial punishments, torturing people and likely tying them to posts in war crimes that imitate crucifixion. They'll execute anyone they suspect of being traitors, and Ukraine's apologists will whitewash these atrocities by dehumanizing those who collaborated with Russia. What they'll leave out is that these people helped Russia because this was their only hope for escaping the human rights abuses which Kiev's genocidal leadership intends to subject the Donbass people to. So this is the case for every other front in the struggle against reaction. The reactionaries are willing to stoop to anything to try to preserve their control. They'll murder and torment however many they need in order to hold back history's progression. The further death and trauma that will be caused by their crimes shouldn't be minimized. But capitalism, imperialism, and colonialism aren't sustainable, and their time will come. In the Donbass, for one example, we've already been seeing tangible progress towards something new. The separatists have given their governing structures the same exceptionally progressive constitution that Stalin's Soviet Union had, a development the imperialist media amusingly tries to use as negative propaganda. One step away from the restoration of socialism in that area. Ultimately, it will become socialist again, along with the rest of former Soviet lands. As more of the world's people gain freedom from imperialism, they'll build new ways of ordering society, ones that show the inferiority of what the U.S. ruling class seeks to impose. It's always nice to read somebody who's written something thoughtful, who's written something like that. Always a pleasure. Major writes, there's a lot of shenanigans going on. I worry about the pro-Russian civilians in those areas. Hopefully Russia evacuated most of them. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, we're dealing with, extremist fascists here. I'm tired of pretending like anything else is happening in Ukraine. The people that are running the show there are Nazis. And it's, and their defeat cannot happen soon enough, if you ask me. Browder was just on CBC P&P, just in case anyone was wondering who the fascists are. Who's Browder? The IAEA knows who shelled the nuke plant. They don't dare say. Yeah. I mean, chances are extremely good it was the Ukrainians, right? Why would the Russians want to shell that plant? What could it possibly gain them? And the Russians have made it, pretty clear over and over again that they're trying to do this operation fairly delicately, right? That they're not doing the shock and awe plan that the United States does. That when the U.S. goes into a region, they just level everything, right? Well, that's not how Russia is acting. It's not just leveling everything. So I can't really stomach Western propaganda about the war, because they're saying the dumbest shit you've ever heard on purpose. Jeremy Dimert. Dimert. Good to see you, bud. Hope you're here to participate. Greetings, comrade. Greetings to you. This is my first time catching you live. Brilliant. I love your show. Glad you're genuinely anti-imperialist voices on the internet and social media. Huzzah! Thank you so much, Jeremy. That's so kind of you, bud. I really appreciate it when first-timers come in and just throw in the bit of support. That's really, really nice. It's nice to see that there are new people hearing what I'm saying, hearing what's happening out in the world, because the truth is that right now we are experiencing a censorship campaign that would make McCarthy blush. That McCarthy himself would never dream of the type of censorship that's happening in today's media. That the news media, the old cable news media guard, the corporate media sources, are essentially just propaganda outlets now. You can't even get dissenting voices. People like Chris Hedges, Chomsky, right? Well-established people who used to go onto these shows and used to go on these things have been chased off. Anti-imperialist voices and communist voices are being more and more deplatformed, more and more. assaulted. I mean, for goodness sakes, once again, Chris Hedges had his show removed from the internet, right? His show On Contact. To me, it's only a matter of time until there is a serious and significant purge that comes about, where any anti-imperialist voice, and then of course, that doesn't even talk about the not the active censorship that occurs, but the deprioritization that occurs. That they take people they blacklist people, but they don't just make it so that you're gone. They just deprioritize you in the algorithm. And they do this so that they can maintain some kind of credibility. And I know that all of my work gets demonetized. Everything that I do is constantly being demonetized and removed. And then on top of that, like, they just don't put ads on it. And so they're never going to pay a person like me to do this. So it's a good opportunity for me to point out, if you appreciate the work and if you appreciate what I'm doing, please actually consider donating to my Patreon. Right? Even $1 gets you into the Discord. And we've got to actually support leftist voices and support people who are actually doing this work. Because the empire is going to start acting crazy. It's going to start going absolutely crazy. And this is a good opportunity to remind myself, because I've been thinking about this for a while now. I've got to get into other platforms. I've got to spread my platform base a little bit more out there, but more work. Always more work. Always another thing to do. So good to see you, Jeremy. Thanks for being here. So, moving back to domestic news. Half of Canadians believe private options would worsen the healthcare system, poll finds. I was actually very, very shocked to see that it was only half. Like, that's the thing that's shocking to me. Half of Canadians believe the creation of new private care options would have a negative impact on the country's healthcare system, an Angus Reid Institute poll suggests. The August online survey of 2,279 adults from across the country found that 32% believe private options would improve the ailing system, while 18% weren't sure. Angus Reid's Institute president, Shashi Churl, described the findings as softening on both sides of the public-private debate, which was more polarized between 20 and 30 years ago. Basically, that's just them admitting that propaganda works, right? The propaganda campaigns that they inflict on the populace are having an effect, right? That people's opinions of these things are softening, right? Because they fail to recognize the extreme threat of, exactly, Nova Scotia is pointing it out as clear as it can be pointed out, right? Create private options and defund the public options, right? Until there's only private options left that have any credibility whatsoever. If you are someone who is a no absolute care absolutist, what the fuck is this? If you are someone who is a no absolute care absolutist, what the fuck is that? Okay, you're going to be worried that it's only 50% who are thinking the same way you are thinking. Oh, okay, so she's talking about me. Because I am worried about that. Only 50%? Like, I would be shocked if that number was 80%. Like, if that number was 80%, I would be like, oh, wow, there's 20% of people who have lost their minds completely. 20% of the populace is just untrustworthy, total nightmare psychos who probably you shouldn't trust to take care of your dog for a day, right? If you're somebody who's maybe more open to the notion of private care, that 30% maybe isn't the number you're looking for. But at the same time, it's a lot higher than it might have been a generation ago. Yeah, propaganda works, right? That's why they do it. The findings published Monday are the third in a series from the Angus Reid Institute, which examined access to healthcare in Canada and the United States. In Canada, the poll has a margin of error ±2, yeah, blah, 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 margin of error. Overall, Canadian male respondents were more likely to support privatization than women, at 38% and 26%, respectively. Oh, look at that. Canadian males, right? Really, really proving that, like, like that. To me, this picture kind of says it all. If you ask me, like we're very thick. This is a very, very silly thing we're doing here, and the more you think about it, the sillier it becomes. Yeah, our healthcare would be absolutely better if there was some worthless parasite siphoning wealth away from the system, right? Absolutely. If the worthless parasite was there, siphoning wealth away from the system, lowering everybody's wages, lowering the quality of care, yeah, that absolutely would be better than if we just funded the fucking thing, right? Across the political spectrum, past conservative voters were most likely to believe private healthcare could offer improvements by 54%, right? Because they will get the care that they need and everybody else will just go die, right? That's the conservative way. Compared to 18% of previous Liberal voters and 10% of past New Democrat voters. The survey also found those with higher incomes were more likely than those with lower incomes to believe privatization could pose a solution. No shit. Right? If psychopaths are more willing to believe that serial murder is a positive thing. In households earning less than $100,000 per year, private healthcare opposition outweighed support by almost 2 to 1. In its series, the Angus Reid Institute has found that nearly 30% of Canadians have experienced chronic difficulty accessing care, and more than 60% of Canadians are not confident they could access health care in a timely way in the event of an emergency. Yeah, it turns out that if you defund the system and make it so that the only option people have is privatization, then there's consequences to that. Who knew? 3 in 5 respondents describe the state of care in their communities as poor, while a quarter believes it's in crisis. 87%, 94%, and 92% reported concerns about doctor shortages, staffing shortages, and surgery wait times, respectively. In BC, 41% of respondents described the state of local healthcare as poor. 52% reported more private healthcare options would worsen the system, and 31% disagreed. South Delta mother of 3, Katrina Mosh, said her family has had tremendous difficulty accessing healthcare in BC. She and her children all have complex care needs, ranging from mental health challenges to chronic pain. Currently, as a disabled person, I am doing the job not only of caregiving for my kids, but also managing all of their health care, their needs, their meetings with different clinics, she told Global News. It would probably be about 3 or 4 full-time people doing the job I'm doing. No stranger to wait lists, canceled appointments, and unrenewed prescriptions, Mosh, who has no family doctor, said she would like to see private care options in the province. Here we go. Now it's turning into a sales pitch, right? So before it was about the poll, and now it's about pitching you the private care, right? They're not going to talk to people who are skeptical of this. No, now they're going to sell you on the idea, because that's how the propaganda works, right? We're going to present you with what people think, and then we're going to try to manipulate that, right? And try to convince you that inserting worthless parasites into the system to lower the quality of care and to dismantle public systems is somehow a benefit to you. It's a grift, very straightforwardly. It's something that psychos do in order to convince you to give them your money. I feel we should all be able to get the same level of care, but if the person has the funding and the money, they can access it now instead of waiting 4 to 5 years on the list, and it helps people like myself who are on disability, then sure, go ahead, use your money for that. So she presents the utopian vision, right? Oh, of course, if the quality of care should be the same for everybody. That's definitely what will 100% happen for sure, right? Like, discussing Angus Reid's finding last week, Vancouver family physician Dr. Anna Wolick said she's not sure the time is right to add a private tier to Canadian healthcare systems, citing cost as a major barrier. Well, maybe they are going to talk to somebody. Wow, I'm shocked. Before having to go into the private-public debate, you need to take a look at the redistribution and reallocation of what is already being given to the public system. Because the money is there. It's just that the people who need it the most aren't getting it, she explained. Last month, the BC government and Doctors of BC announced a $118 million short-term fund to help stabilize family physician practices and clinics in the province. Meanwhile, the two groups are working to address stagnant wages and a problematic fee model that doctors have said results in patient backlogs, along with increased and unsustainable business costs. In a written statement responding to the poll results, the BC Ministry of Health attributed many service delays in the past 2 years to the COVID-19 pandemic, along with unprecedented demand on the system. Significant investments are coming in the next few weeks and months, it added. Almost 100% of patients whose scheduled surgeries were delayed in the first wave of the pandemic have now had their operations, said the ministry, along with nearly 80% of those whose operations were postponed in the fourth and fifth waves. It's also cited tremendous progress on wait times for diagnostic imaging in the province. We know people continue to feel those challenges, but we're confident our progress so far demonstrates our willingness to continue to meet these challenges, the ministry wrote. And D's nuts are a grift indeed, Conton. Good contribution as always. A military asset, good to see you by the way, Isaac. A military asset said on CNN yesterday that Ukraine has killed about 50,000 Russians and have taken 80% of the land Russia occupied. What the fuck? Dude, that's crazy talk. Like, that's crazy talk. Come on. Like, that's insane. That Ukrainian has killed 50,000 Russians. Like, I could believe that 50,000 Russians have died since the beginning of the conflict. That sure. But are you saying in, like, this one individual push, 50,000 Russians, and have taken 80% of the land Russia occupied? That's just stupid. You'd have to actually be stupid to believe that 80% of the land that Russia occupied, the Ukrainians have taken back. What the fuck? You'd have to actually be like, literally be like, QAnon dumb. Like that's what we're talking about. We're talking like cross-eyed, like, oh, they're taking 80% of the land back. I heard it on the CNN news network, right? Like that's so stupid that I'm shocked that they would put that on TV. Like, I'm shocked that they would even try, right? Because it's so stupid. It's like the most falsifiable thing you could possibly say. Like, the only thing that would be stupider is if they were like, the war is over and we won, Russia left. Only that would be dumber. But people would fucking believe it. People would fucking believe it. Meanwhile, here's one coming out of Reuters, right? Real fun one, this one, right? Modern slavery on the rise as crisis fuels poverty. UN report. So we have to be a bit skeptical of the UN these days, but the number of people forced into modern forms of slavery has risen a fifth in recent years to around 50 million on any given day, amid a surge in poverty and other crises, the UN International Labour Organization said on Monday. Gee, I wonder who's the primary driving force of that. Who do you think they're going to say is the primary driving force? Could it possibly be capitalism? Could it possibly be going into countries like Libya and destroying them? Right? Could it possibly be all of the war and terrorism created by the CIA? Let's read on. More than half of those who have been forced to work against their will and others forced into marriage, the ILO said. Both came under its definition of modern slavery as they involved people who cannot refuse or cannot leave because of threats, violence, deception, abuse of power, or other forms of coercion, it added. I mean, I can't refuse. Can you? Like, you can refuse the type of work that you're doing, but then you've got to go off and go get another job, right? Right? So according to this definition of modern slavery, like, if I were to quit my job, I would be destitute immediately. I would have to turn around and go get another job working for someone very similarly, right? In a very similar situation. So capitalism breeds slavery. It's very, very straightforward, right? The situation has been exacerbated by crises such as COVID-19, armed conflicts, and climate change, which has left more people in extreme poverty and more forced to migrate, the agency said. I think by and large that we simply relaxed our efforts. We've taken our eye off the ball when it comes to forced labor. ILO Director General Guy Ryder told Reuters, calling for improvements in recruitment practices and labor inspections. He said trade measures, such as a ban on products and imports made with forced labor currently under review by the European Union, could also help. Compared with the last count for the year 2016, the number of people in modern slavery has risen by about 9.3 million people, the report said. I mean, as long as you don't include, like, all of the workers in the imperial core, right? As long as, if you're working for a capitalist job, right, you're not considered a slave. But if you're working under, capitalism is a slave system. It doesn't provide food and shelter for the citizens. It doesn't say, if you're sick or disabled or any of this, we're going to take care of you meaningfully, right? Like, it doesn't say any of these things. It says, get a job. That's what it says. And sure, it gives you the option to go out and pick your job, right? But go get a job. And who are you always working for? Well, you're always working for the capitalists, right? So we have an inverted totalitarian system where you're constantly working against your own interests and for the interests of these worthless parasites. That's the system, right? And of course, slavery is going to increase because capitalists are slavers. They enjoy slavery, right? Like that, and they'll tell you so. Like when Kevin O'Leary releases a video saying, if you quiet quit, you're a loser, right? You should work for free. What do you think he's saying? What do you think he's trying to tell you? He's trying to tell you that you need to work for free. That's what he's telling you. Like, capitalists want slavery. They enjoy it. They like it. That anytime a capitalist system arises, they implement slave systems constantly, right? And it's only through a mass organization and literal war that we have been able to slough off slave systems. But you'll find that capitalists are very clever when it comes to instituting slavery. And you'll find that they find new ways, such as the American prison slave system, right? And so when I read this report, like, this is what's great about this, right? So you read this report, and the ILO report also pointed to concern about accusations of forced labor in parts of China. What about the forced labor in the American prison system? Like, the American prison system is a forced labor concentration camp slave system. That's what it is. That the American empire picks random people off the streets, incarcerates them for no reason, right? And forces them into forced labor on behalf of the state. That's what's happening all throughout the United States. Is the ILO talking about that? Where's the ILO report on that? Oh, isn't that interesting? How there's no fucking ILO report on fucking... what about the Temporary Foreign Workers Program that exists here in Canada, which is a slave system? Like, even the people who are working within the Temporary Foreign Workers Program are talking about it as if it's a slave system. Because it is a slave system. We go to countries, blow them up, right? Steal their resources, and this creates a refugee crisis. And many of these refugees flee up to Canada thinking, oh, I'll be able to get work here. right? Oh, we've got a temporary foreign workers program. Come work in Canada. You can work in the farms and all this kind of stuff. And then when they get here, they realize that it's a slave system because it is. It's designed that way, right? And we just don't talk about it. But we got to make sure that we keep talking about accusations of forced labor is part of the job, right? Like, we're so fucking upside down and backwards and turned inside out. Like, we just don't care. You know? We just don't care. I think that's a big part of it. That if we even did start to report on this stuff in a meaningful sort of a way, I just don't think we would care. Like, I think we're so lost as a people. I think we're so entranced by by ourselves, right? And by, like, social media, by these digital hallucinations, by Marvel movies and all this kind of stuff, that even if we did start to actually acknowledge, like, yeah, these are slave systems that exist within our society, we would just shrug and be like, well, then get to it, slaves. That's, I think there would be a huge section of the population that would talk that way, right? Your fucking Ben Shapiro's and Petersons absolutely would. Well, just get to it, slave. You're a slave. Be a slave. Tough, right? This is how you were born. This is how it is. Base, how you doing, bud? Ukrainian Nazi battalion heroes killed 1 quadrillion Russians in 2 nanoseconds, according to Northern European news. That's right. And they took, not only did they take back all the Ukrainian land, they also took all of Russia. And the king of China, his head exploded from all of the extreme craziness. Dude, listening to Pierre Poilievre actually say dictator oil, it's just fucking brilliant, man. Like, straight up, like, this guy does not give a fuck about anything. He's literally just, I want to be the Prime Minister of Canada. And if my people need to hear me say dictator oil in order to get it. It's like, what dictatorship are you talking about? Like, are you talking about the Queen that we all just fucking are supposed to be jerking off about? Is that the dictator that you're talking about? Right? A literal monarch that we're still, like, for some reason supposed to give a shit about? Like, the way that we are treating the death of the Queen discredits any critique of any other society, right? We're all just like, oh, the Queen, she's so precious and beautiful, what a lovely, oh my God, and she's so, and may her reign in heaven, and she's up with Jesus now, and you just got article after article of people just absolutely, like, gushing and losing their minds about the Queen, and it's like, don't you guys, like, say that countries that do this, like, if North Korea has a celebration, don't you call this, like, a weird propaganda campaign? And don't you treat it like it's like, oh, it's 1984, right? Like, don't you treat it like that? But if we do it about this fucking monarchical fucking queen, oh, it's normal. Totally fucking normal. Broccoli cheddar rice, good to see you, bud. Could it be that free labor under capitalism is cheaper than the actual maintenance of actual slavery? They don't have to pay for your food, shelter, healthcare, etc. That critique right there, broccoli cheddar rice, was one that was actually given by the chattel slaves themselves on the lead up to the Civil War. I have a book, I don't know if I've got it right here, but I've got a book called Cotton is King. It's a book that I strongly believe should be required reading. Like, the fact that it's not required reading, that we read books like 1984 or like even Shakespeare plays. I have a degree in theater, and I feel like even the reading of Shakespeare plays, and we're reading books like that, and we're not reading Cotton is King, basically tells you what the education system is for, right? The education system is for the glorification of white supremacy and the glorification of our culture and the eradication of individual thought. That's what it's for. It's to create an obedient workforce. That's what it's for. Cotton is King is a collection of essays that was created by the pro-slavery side of the conversation on the lead up to the Civil War. And the pro-slavers had many arguments that they used. Some of them were literally like, look how much money we're making, right? There were straight up, like, there's economic reports of just like, this is how much money we're making. If you get rid of slavery, then we're not going to make this much money. And some of the arguments were like, God wants slavery to exist, right? If these people didn't want to be slaves, they shouldn't be black, right? But one of the arguments that they used was that chattel slavery was a more compassionate form of slavery. That they viewed wage slavery, which is what the Northerners were planning to transfer it over to. Although Lincoln ran on a platform of abolishing wage slavery, they viewed wage slavery as a less compassionate form of slavery. That the chattel slaves, at least, you owned them, and so you had to take care of them, right? You couldn't just discard them when you wanted to, the way that you can in a wage slave system, right? And so this period of time, like a book like Cotton is King, is very illuminating because it shows you that there was a period of time in the discussion that would happen of labor, that it was understood that the system we currently have in place, the wage slave system, is a wage slave system. That and it's not something to be giggled about or chortled about. It's actually, seriously, very real, a wage slave system that the chattel slaves thought was morally inferior. We should probably organize along those lines and fight back against it. But instead we've got these loser Trudeau, like, liberal, like, dumbasses, and a population that's, like, seems to be quite happy with its enslavement. At least they had to provide for the slaves to keep alive for the next cotton picking season. But now they only provide if you work. But if you don't, you're screwed. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's a wage slave system. Thanks to the book recommendation, I'll look that up. Reminds me of the dual origin of the police slave captures in the South, Union busters in the North. Yeah, and I mean, to me, Cotton is King is like, it's must read. Like, you can see a lot of the arguments that get used today, like by capitalist apologists, are essentially arguments that come out of Cotton is King. Right? They are defending a slave system. And they know that they're defending a slave system. They want you to work for nothing. That's what they're doing. Some of them are more subtle than others. Right? Some of them are some of them are a bit more gracious than others. But in the end, if you're a capitalist, your objective is to make people work for you for nothing. That's your goal. I misheard that as Cotton is King. Well, Cotton, yeah, always gracious. If North Korea would be happy, a similar celebration as Queen. Oh yeah, if North Korea had a similar celebration as the Queen, they would be saying it's a cult. Yeah, exactly. No, but they do, and they do say that, right? Like they say that of Kim Jong-il, right? The previous leader who died. They literally, like, what do they call the system? It's like a necropsy or something like this, where they try to say that the Korean people genuinely believe that they're still ruled by, like, the previous leader and all of this kind of stuff, which is just childish propaganda. Like, it's so obviously false, and yet we're all, like, supposed to, like, go along with these overt nonsense phrases. Like, nobody in North Korea genuinely believes that a previously deceased leader is the person who's responsible for the power of the state. Like, shut up. It's so babyish. Like, it's so babyish. And yet we're supposed to take it seriously, while these people, like, salivate and weep crocodile tears because of the death of some old colonial bitch. Like, who gives a shit about her at all? Christopher De Silva, good to see you. Trudeau's disgust at PP is so performative. Yeah, if he really cared, he'd be fighting climate change, creating affordable housing. Yeah, like, that's what I always say. Like, if Trudeau actually was afraid or cared about PP, about Skippy, he'd be doing something. right? He'd be listening to what Pierre Poilievre was saying, right? Because Pierre Poilievre's power comes from the fact that he's acknowledging the suffering of the citizenry. He's actually saying, oh, the citizens are in despair. The citizens are suffering. So we're going to galvanize that angst and that anger, right? And we're going to pivot it into conservative talking points, right? To create a kind of narrative that that creates this kind of narrative that people can get behind, right? And vote for me. I'm acknowledging your pain, and we're going to do something about it. Whereas the Trudeau Liberals, like, they've had what, 10 years at least now to do anything about any of this stuff, and they're not fucking doing shit. Like, they're not doing anything. It's all performative. It's all just a way to try to convince you that something serious is happening when nothing serious is happening whatsoever, right? Just keep working for a system of death. Just keep working for a system that's designed to destroy you. Just keep saying yes. Just keep being a yes man, right? The education system is nothing but disciplining and conditioning. It cripples self-esteem by design to cause obedience, and it even somehow trains people to be discriminatory and competitive against each other based on grades in universities. It literally makes teenagers and young adults depressed and robs their lives of meaning and self-determination. What's more evil than that? I see that shit every day, and I've been seeing it for so many years now. It's saddening. Yeah, that's the purpose of the education system. The purpose of the education system is to create an obedient, compliant group of yes men. That sure, there is a degree of competency, but vetting for competency comes much later, right? Like your frauds and hacks like Peterson walk around talking about meritocracy as if that's a real thing, and they'll talk about competency, but they'll fail to recognize that the vetting of competency comes much later, right? Vetting for competency doesn't matter so much at the beginning. The first thing that you're vetting for, and the thing that you always vet for in an education system, is obedience. That what matters is whether or not they do what they're told. And if they don't do what they're told, then that gets them the worst marks, right? Like, nobody gets worse marks in an education system than somebody who doesn't do what they're told, right? That as long as you make the attempt, well, then we can grade you based on your competency at the making of the attempt. But if you see what's happening as a kid and you think, I'm not going to participate in that because it's pointless or stupid or it runs counter to living a fulfilling life or anything, well, then you're vetted right out of the system. You get the worst possible marks. So compliance and obedience are the most important thing. And God help you if you hear something being taught in a school that you disagree with and that you think is actually wrong. Like, God help you with that, because then you're going to get really bad marks, right? Especially if you start talking about it, especially if you start challenging the curriculum, right? If you look at it and you think to yourself, this is incorrect, this is a wrong position, well, then you're really going to get vetted out. And so what do you end up with? Right? You end up with people at the highest level, right? Basically being yes men. Essentially just the people who say yes, sir, and who say yes, sir, the best, getting the highest marks. They get the degree, they get the move ahead, they get the scholarships, right? They get into the good schools where they continue to be trained to be yes men, right? And to just say yes, sir. Right? This is the way you make money. This is the way you run a business. This is the way you do things. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then finally, when you graduate from those institutions, well, you're going to go off and you're going to go get the best jobs, right? Because you're the yes man, right? You obeyed, right? And so the capitalists are going to entrust you with these businesses. They're going to entrust you with this stuff because when it comes time to lay off 30% of your workforce on behalf of the capitalist death cult, you're going to say yes, sir. And they know you are because they've trained you so well, right? And that's the way the system works. And now we're getting into a position where the owners of the society don't care about anything other than the money they're making, right? And the populace that they have trained is incapable of challenging them, right? So It's literally going to be you're like I think the most pathetic aspect of Western civilization today is that you're going to have a group of people who are saying yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, all the way up until their complete and total betrayal. That the system eventually betrays everyone, right? And you're going to have a group of people who are going to march into that betrayal while committing to the very acts they've been told to commit to fulfill that betrayal, right? It's going to be like pure. It's going to be like a pure form of betrayal, like as pure as someone like stabbing you in the back with a dagger. And these people are simply not going to believe that it has happened until after it has occurred. And even after that, they're going to have to be like told and reminded and they're going to have a realization moment that what has happened is betrayal and that is not okay, right? Because these people end up being like simps for capital, right? They end up being and there are going to be people who are going to be overtly betrayed by this capitalist system, and they're going to say things like, well, I'm sure they had a good reason for it. Like, they're going to be capitalist apologists until they die, right? That the betrayals are going to somehow be seen as warranted, that their constant despair, because the system is a despair generation, right? Well, they must have done something wrong, right? I could have done better, right? I guess I could have made a different decision or all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, you just ceased being useful to the capitalist. And it's just as simple as that. The betrayal of the citizenry by the system of capital is structural and built into the system. And as the system begins to betray more and more people, there will be people who become revolutionaries, who become who realize the nature of the system is fraudulent and evil. But there's going to be people who are just gaslit, who just believe that they're the problem, right? And that and who actually do buy in to this idea that, oh, they just need to bootstrap themselves and just, oh, I'll just pull myself up and all that kind of stuff, right? And as the poverty and as everything begins to spread, you'll just have these absolutely you'll have these absolutely bought in losers who still buy in. Yep. Yes, sir. No, sir. May I lick your boots, sir? Exactly. I even hear the anti-DPRK propaganda from the left. Yeah. Yep. Obama acknowledged the suffering of the people, didn't do anything. People in Flint still have drinking water. Yeah. Acknowledgement is a powerful tool, right? Acknowledging the suffering of people is very, very powerful. Because if you're living in an environment where you're being so heavily gaslit, where you're being so heavily gaslit, that then simply having somebody say, no, what's happening to you is legitimate, is very affirming. It's very affirming for people. And if you're looking at your options and you're seeing gaslighters and frauds and grifters and liars, and then one guy who's saying, no, I hear you, I hear what you're saying, you're going to go along with them, and you're going to fail to recognize, and even if you do recognize that what he's doing is grifting you, right? That his grift is to acknowledge what's happening so that he'll get your support, and then but at least he's pointing at it and saying it's real. And so even if you acknowledge that it might be a grift, you're still going to support that person, because at least he's acknowledging the truth of your life, right? At least that is affirming. At least that means that if that guy who is a grifter, fine, he's a grifter, right? But at least it means that if he gets into power, you can say, what's happening to me is happening. And you can banish the gaslighters, and you can point at that person and say, The President of the United States of America says it's true. Who the fuck are you? You can at least say that. And so acknowledgement is an incredibly powerful tool, right? You can see the Trudeau Liberals doing it, right? They acknowledge that climate change is real, and look how far it's gotten them, right? While they basically do fuck all about it, you know? So simply acknowledging the truth of what's happening is an incredible, powerful political tool. And it does move the cultural bar, right? It might not move the legislative bar, but it does move the cultural bar. That it's harder to gaslight people after such an event like that occurs. It becomes much more difficult to continue the gaslighting grift. That the people who elected Obama, right, had something affirmed in their consciousness and had something true that they could rally behind. And it makes it much more difficult to gaslight them. So even though Obama ends up being like just another fucking worthless imperialist grifter, I think a lot of people still would have supported him under those circumstances. Major says, I lost marks just for arguing an opinion different from my teacher once. Yeah, like, teachers are, like, many of them are just petty losers, right? Like, we've done interesting studies on power, and if you have a little shred of power, no matter how small, right, people will abuse that power, right? Because it's all they've got. They've got this little tiny shred of power. That's why you end up with like bureaucrats in like some little weird basement job where you got to fill out a paper, all this kind of stuff. It's why they get really like anal about it, and they get really, really uptight and really like. It's why they throw blockades in people's ways, right? Because it's all they have. It's the only power that they can exert in the world, and so they're exerting it, right? It's why people act that way. Ace of Base says, I don't think competency and university are connected, not in this system. I've met so many self-taught people who have incredible skills and knowledge that they acquired out of passion and necessity. Plus, degrees such as business administration, economics, and such are notoriously easy and have nothing to do with competence. They're usually a way to justify their wealth with their Harvard MBAs. I mean, yeah, a lot of that's the truth, dude. Like, a lot of that's the truth. Like, I will always point out, why does a university have an economics degree and a business degree? Why are those separate degrees? One would assume that an economics degree would be a business degree, right? But the truth of it is that economics is no longer a valid profession in the university system. That economics professors and economics teachers are they don't know what they're talking about. Like, they're literally just yes men who are just saying yes to trickle down economics, and even the capitalist system knows that they're fraudulent, because why else would they support a business school? What's the point of a business school? Well, the point of a business school is to teach people what economics actually is, to a degree, right? So in business school, you get taught how economics works in a very pragmatic sort of a way up to a point, and they never give you any kind of meta, right? They never give you the meta observation. They never give you any perspective that supersedes your station, and your station is to just work for us, right? That's what business school is. Sure, you might be able to go off and run your own business, but they'll never give you a meta-analysis of what capitalism actually is or what it looks like, because if they did that, you might realize it's a slave system exclusively. And then the economics field is where they have gone, oh, you can get your meta-analysis from the economics field, but what do you get there, right? You get a bunch of trickle-down nonsense. And you won't talk about the oligarchy. You won't talk about the slave structure of capital. You won't talk about any of that. You just get neoliberal capitalism, right? So it's fraudulent on the like all across the board, right? You just end up getting a field of yes men, right? And it's the only way to actually get the degree. It's the only way to actually get the check mark is if you say yes sir, right? And so you end up, so if you go into economics, you end up being illiterate, right? And I see that all the time. I read articles like every other day from people who are like, I have a degree in economics from the University of Calgary. And I'm like, this is incomprehensible nonsense that doesn't work and fails instantly. People from like the Fraser Institute who are just worse than illiterate, right? Worse than illiterate because they actually think they know something. Like I would prefer to talk economics with somebody who literally is illiterate than somebody who is educated in the Fraser Institute. Because they actually think they know something, and and so you end up with like these absolutely moronic, illiterate morons who end up becoming like the Secretary of the Treasury, right? Who end up being like an advisor to the Clinton administration or something, right? Who are just gone. They don't know what economics is because they think neoliberal economics is economics when it's a religion, right? It's a religious ideology exclusively. It's not rooted in anything even resembling mathematics or evidence or facts or reason or compassion or empathy. It's not rooted in any of that, right? And then if you go down the business school route, well, then you basically just become a worker for these guys. That's basically what it is. You're just a worker for capital. That's all. I game with this TeamSpeak friend group. I can confirm. Even a little bit of power turned our server admin to shit. Yeah, it's funny how it works, eh? It's just like it's just like a little shred. It can be as petty as possible, like as petty as possible. Sometimes people just act in ways that are completely irrational because they have this tiny shred of power and they can influence people with that power. On speaking of teachers, I still remember clear as day back in the day when my history teacher had a lengthy, smug, mocking monologue about how communism doesn't work before even explaining what it is. Yeah. Like, because they don't know. That's the thing. Like, they don't know what it is. They don't know what's being argued. They don't know what the position actually is. Because if they did, like, at its most basic, communism is the idea that there is that there are owners and there are owned, and that the owned work on behalf of the owners who do no work whatsoever, and that this creates an antagonism within the society that we should resolve. That fundamentally at base, that is what communism is. That and capitalist apologists refuse and are incapable, like literally incapable of acknowledging this, because they know that even acknowledging the actual fact of what communism actually is discredits the project of capital. Because anybody who has a brain in their head, anybody who has like a grade 1 reading level, anyone who has thought about anything on like a kindergarten level can recognize that yes, the system of capital is one that has an antagonism built inside of it, where there are owners and there are owned, and that antagonism leads to crises, leads to a constant perpetual fight, leads to a constant perpetual struggle, and it leads to collapses constantly because we are constantly at odds with one another, right? And this isn't a moral statement. This isn't saying that owners are bad morally. This isn't saying that the owned are sad and pathetic. This isn't saying any of that. It is a structural truth that when one side benefits, the other side loses. So it's a constant, perpetual fight that needs to be resolved. And if you don't understand that, then you can't really talk about communism. Like, that's what it is. And we can have debates and conversations about how to resolve this and about how to resolve this central antagonism. But if you're not going to acknowledge the existence of the antagonism, if you're just going to pretend it's a meritocracy and everybody's ascending the meritocracy, or if you're going to pretend that the solution is to become an owner, right? If you're just going to pretend like these are legitimate solutions, then you're not a serious person, right? You're just an apologist for a system of death that is actively and on purpose creating an extinction event that is going to actually wipe us out. And if we don't actually confront that, and we confront it by being honest about the nature of our own system, then we're going to get completely fucked over, right? I've learned more in the years after finishing school. Yeah, I mean, it's... To me, I think that a big component of the school system is to make people hate learning. I think that's a really big component of how school is. That we've really got to make sure that the people who are leaving these institutions are so fed up with learning that they'll never actually try to learn anything else, right? They'll never actually go, because the system of learning that exists in the school system is like the antithesis of how learning actually is, right? That even the testing, the way that they test kids, I'm just like, it's the antithesis of what learning is. It's not how you learn anything. It's not how you actually know anything, right? It's just a obedience test. That's all it is. Will you cram this information into your brain enough to be able to regurgitate it back onto the page and then instantly forget it? Because that's what's happening, right? Like, nobody's walking around with like the full and moreover, no one in the civil society expects anybody to be this way. Like, nobody expects anybody to walk around with like with textbooks memorized so precisely that they can like source to a page. If you have that, that's considered incredible, right? And yet that's how literally every test works, right? And it's done on purpose. It's done on purpose. It's done to make you hate it. It's done so that you'll hate learning and you'll hate going out of your way to find out anything new, and that you'll just seed any kind of skepticism and any kind of a secondary thought pattern in and you'll just seed it to people who are also they themselves yes men, right? The quote unquote journalists, right? That oh, they must be telling the truth, right? Or I just assume they're telling the truth, right? Well, obviously they're part of this institution and they're all this kind of stuff. When they themselves are also just yes men, they're just reading what they're told to read by people who they themselves are yes men. Yeah, all they learn on business is to lower costs, mainly wages, and increase prices. That's right. That's right. Because again, they're just being taught obedience, right? They're just being taught obedience. 99% of business students I meet are annoyingly conservative. They end up knowing less than nothing after university. They don't really learn. Yeah. Like, because what they are learning are counter narratives to the truth. That's what's being taught, right? That these institutions aren't really interested in teaching the truth. Like, why do you think there's such an enormous outcry about CRT, right? Why do you think there's this enormous outcry throughout the United States about teaching CRT in schools, right? And it's because people know that if you teach kids about the history of slavery, if you teach kids about the models of slavery that the system used and how we treated people in the past, they might recognize that behavior now and insist that it stops. Right? That's what's really going on there. That capitalism is attempting to enslave people. It wants to be a slave system. It is a slave system, right? It perpetuates slave systems constantly. And if you teach kids about slavery and about America's history of slavery, they might insist that it stop, right? And they might be less willing to perpetuate slave systems themselves. So instead, you need to teach kids about the glories of entrepreneurship, right? That if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and work really hard and get your hands dirty, right? And be an entrepreneur and really sell yourself to a capitalist, right? That's freedom. And if you can create a society of people who genuinely believe that, oh, the work I put in is the work that I get out, and if I want good things to happen in my life, I'm gonna have to work for capitalists, right? If you can teach a group of people to actually believe that, well, then you've got a slave system, and it's perfect because they're happy with it, right? That's what's so blisteringly shocking about the libertarian movement, right? Is that on its face, you don't even need to sift, you don't even need to dig into it. Right? On its face, they say to you that selling yourself to capitalists is freedom. It's incredible. It's incredible to watch. And there's a reason why Western civilization is about to experience extraordinary collapses. Extraordinary collapses. Things that are going to make the 2008 financial collapse look like baby's first collapse. Like, we are plunging ourselves, desperately plunging ourselves into a new Great Depression. And it is going to be just brutal. It is. It's going to be absolutely brutal. And the people who own the society don't care. All they care about is their own personal wealth. And as long as their own personal wealth is good, then they're happy. They don't care. And the people who are working for them are so illiterate and so bought in that they're not going to change it or reform it or try to do anything about it. And so all that's left is for the victims to get together and surround the halls of power. That's all that's left, right? Because there is no such thing as an educated person in America, right? You have like a tiny little handful of people that I can point to. People like Chris Hedges, Noam Chomsky, Richard Wolff, right? You've got this small, tiny, little group. And do those people get platformed in mainstream media? Do those people get talked to? Is there a moment when we're going to talk to a dissenting voice today? Does that ever happen? No, right? Of course not. Because they don't want the populace to actually realize how much of a grift this all is. And they certainly don't want the populace to realize that economics is not a science in America, that it is a religion, that neoliberalism is a religion, it is a death cult, and it is not actually attempting to be anything other than that. I remember when I first read that the system of trickle-down economics was like mathematically flawed. That like there was like a grad student that actually went through the mathematics that was used in order to justify trickle-down economics and found errors and flaws in it that collapsed the system. I thought to myself, oh, well, they're going to respond to this, right? Like that's a big story, right? That's a big change. That a model that we were using was shown to be incorrect, and so we're going to remodel it and move on. Nope. It was just a grift. It was just a lie. And they are the only reason they had even attempted to present it as a science was to obfuscate what was fundamentally true. Good evening, Eric. How you doing, bud? Replaying it fast. I love the idea of people replaying this whole thing on fast forward. So I'm talking like this whole time, and all a boy in a shopping cart. I remember my first collapse. I was too young and too rural. I was living in rural Manitoba when the first collapse happened for me. The first collapse that happened for me was the web collapse, right? That people had invested a whole bunch of stuff in the internet, but it turned out to be just a bunch of grifters stealing money from rich people, and the whole thing collapsed. But the 2008 collapse was a very serious collapse. That was a serious collapse. That I mean wasn't really addressed at all, right? We just bailed the rich people out and said, just everybody keep moving on, everything's fine. Essentially, is what happened. And then you've got like the housing market, the housing bubble collapse, because the system can't help it. Like it can't help itself. Like it's just a bunch of fucking grifters going around grifting each other. That's the game. Eric says, going back to Ukraine, there's a rumor I heard on the Duran that there is a possibility that Ukraine did a huge mistake with their attack on Kharkov because they had to take some troops from the south and away from the strategic interest, which leaves the Russian force wide open, and there is an offense by the Wagner Group to take control of a major city in the south of Ukraine, which would be a major game changer. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes. That's rumor and speculation, but honestly, like not outside of the realm of possibility, Eric. Like, Putin himself has said that the territory that they lost was not really important. And it isn't important. It wasn't important territory that they lost. And if Ukraine is going to put a bunch of resources into pushing into areas that have no strategic benefit, well, yeah, that by definition they're going to leave themselves open to counterattacks and counter moves, right? The West has been very arrogant in the way that it's been dealing with Putin, and they've really been treating Putin as though he's not clever, and Putin has shown one of the things that's absolutely fundamentally true, that that he's much more clever than they are, right? Like by fairly large degrees. Like the sanction idea completely backfired. It's completely backfired entirely. That alone, right? Like Putin's going to go down in history as and people are going to think of him as a fairly clever leader because of moves like that, being able to shift the society and shift the economy in such a way for the benefit of Russia. And the Westerners just don't seem capable of understanding that Putin isn't going, like, they're used to dealing with like small states that have very small populations, right? Like they're used to going into a place like Iraq and just blowing everything up and taking over, right? And they're used to everybody looking at them with this like, oh, kind of shock and awe, right? That's what the Americans are used to. People like, they're used to people bowing down and worshiping them, right? That's what they're used to. And Putin's not doing that, right? Putin's looking at them and being like, oh, you're going to do sanctions? Well, then we're going to do this. Oh, you're going to take that territory? Well, then we're going to do this. Oh, you're going to do that? We're going to do this, right? Like, and Putin is showing over and over and over again, and the Russians are showing over and over and over again, that they understand the game better than the Americans do. Because the game the Americans are playing is one based on illusions. They've deluded themselves, is what the Americans have done. Like they've believed their own grifts, and it's collapsing. The 80s was rife with recession. Again, like what's so fucked up when I talk about the 80s, like I was as disconnected from all of that as a person can be. Like, I literally lived in, like, rural Manitoba. Like, not in a town. I lived in a small, like, farm, like, basically a farm outside And so for me, the 80s, and the 80s, my father was he owned an auto repair shop, right? And so for him, the 80s was a boom period, right? And he failed to recognize the betrayal of the Mulrooney and the betrayal of NAFTA that ultimately betrayed his business and collapsed it ultimately, right? But he failed to recognize that that was the case. And so I have a kind of a longer view, or a different view of that period of time, where I see the devastating effects of NAFTA on my own family. Because by any account, my father's business should still be a very respectable, large-scale operation. But NAFTA completely destroyed it. Major, you're saying RT is reporting the former Russian president, Medvedev, used a Book of Revelation quote to comment on Kiev's security treaty demands. Revelations 9:18. Dude, that's a weird quote, because the Russians follow Orthodox Christianity, and Orthodox Christianity doesn't use the Book of Revelations. So it's a bit weird. Revelations 9:18. A third of mankind was killed by the 3 plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur that proceeded from their mouths. I mean, it's a bit on the nose, Medvedev. Bit on the nose. Going back to the UN report, I love it, Eric. You're like catching up, and so you're like, you're like trying to get your 2 cents in. Going back to the UN report, it looks like they also completely omitted the report from the Australian lawyer report. Yeah, they admitted everybody, right? There were like fucking Islamic countries sent like 30 delegations, omitted. The visit of Michelle Bachelet itself was omitted, right? So like, yeah, there's a lot of credible sources that demonstrate Russia simply left. People were there, yeah. The West doesn't understand that Putin has been prepared for this since 2008, when he realized NATO won't stop expanding. Honestly, to me, Isaac, the number one event has to be when Russia applied for NATO membership and they said no. It's got to be the case, right? Like, the reason NATO was created was to dismantle the Soviet Union. That Gorbachev, Yeltsin, Khrushchev, all those guys kind of went through a process of legislatively dismantling the Soviet Union and leaving the question of like, okay, why does NATO exist on the table, right? And the whole concept of the peace dividend and all this kind of stuff, which, can you imagine if we were living in a world where Russia joined NATO, right? And I actually think that if America was rational, right? If it was capable of rational thinking, it would absolutely say, yeah, we should for sure let Russia into NATO and like really solidify like an alliance that really creates like Russia is no longer an antagonistic figure for us. That really lets us turn towards China, lets us turn towards other things, and look at Russia as a reliable able that we can really like. American history in regards to its relationship with Russia is constantly like this. Like, there's constantly these moments that come up where it's like America and Russia were on the same side of World War II, right? Like, why wouldn't they out Roosevelt had a very good relationship with Stalin, right? There are all kinds of encounters where Roosevelt and Stalin got together and they walked away thinking, what a great guy, like we had a great time together, right? We have all kinds of testimony and stories like this. and like Stalin and Roosevelt pranking on Churchill and like all this kind of stuff, right? And yet after World War II, Russia becomes like our central antagonizer, right? Because we need a boogeyman, as always, right? Because if we don't have a boogeyman, people might realize that capitalism itself is the boogeyman. And and when we said no when NATO said no to Russia joining, that has to be the moment when Putin goes, oh, okay, like, you guys are coming for us, for sure. Like, any illusion we had, any thought we had about Russia being able to work with Westerners and be able to join this internationalist system, to join any of this kind of stuff, that's gone. And it had to be that way. Like, I know that's what I would think, that if I applied for NATO and they said no, I would be like, oh, so the organization that exists to dismantle the Soviet Union just said no to us joining it after we kind of legislatively purged the Soviet Union and are attempting to integrate ourselves into this internationalist system, right? Just said no. Okay, we're on our own, and we have to assume that it's coming for us. We have to. And by any account that I'm looking at, it looks like that's exactly what they've been planning for since that moment. That for at least a decade, Russia has clearly been making maneuvers and making plans with the assumption that the West had already betrayed them. Because I just think that capitalism can't help itself. I really do. Like, I really think the system of capital is not capable of building alliances. It's not capable of moving towards world peace. It's not capable of it because it's never interested in it. That all alliances are just alliances of opportunity, right? And they are more than willing to betray people. And you see it over and over again, just constantly. Yeah, I was a city boy then. It was rough in old Milwaukee, yeah. Like, when it was still manufacturing things. Yeah, the shift away from manufacturing, right? Like, you want to talk about, like, capitalists don't care about national security. They don't care about they don't care about the success of the nation. They don't care about anything. They literally care about a hoarded pile of gold. That's all they care about. And the dismantling of the manufacturing base is exactly the proof you need. It's you don't need any other evidence to see how little the capitalist class actually cares about the citizens it presumes to rule over than the dismantling of the manufacturing base. Because, like, talk about a major national security issue, right? Not only just a major national security issue, but a complete distorting of the economy. Like, you've essentially collapsed your economy by removing your own manufacturing sector, right? You've made it so that your own country can't build anything and can't provide goods and can't do anything. So you don't train your citizens to know how to do it in the first place. So you're in this, like, you've by default created this enormous decline for yourself. And what's hilarious is that now there's a Chinese ambassador who's going around to places like the WEF. And I gotta find a clip of this guy actually doing this and show you guys, because I keep seeing him, and it's hilarious every single time. He goes to places like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, like all of these places, and he asks the same question over and over again. Why did you guys dismantle your manufacturing base? Why did you give us your manufacturing base? What has having these billionaires gotten you? Like, what are you getting for having these billionaires? And he's just asking these questions, and it's clear that the people he asks these questions to are flabbergasted by them. That they don't even know how to begin to answer the question. And they always fall into just like a word salad garbage nonsense. Because they know that to acknowledge the actual reasons for why America dismantled its own manufacturing base, right, and erected an oligarchy would be to admit that it's an oligarchy, but then to b admit that they never cared about the success of their own people, ever. It's never been a part of it, and like, it's not difficult to realize why America is in the decline that it's in. That it's ruled by a group of detached, psychotic losers who are incapable of understanding the most basic principles of how to even act, right? Like we're talking about barbarians. We're talking about people who put on suits, but who are, in their ethos and their mindset, no better than fucking cavemen. Literally, they're walking around with a big giant club, and they're going to club whoever they need to club in order to be the biggest club. That's it. That's it. And you can see it in the way that they're acting towards Russia. Like, they don't know anything about Russia. They don't care to know anything about Russia, right? That the people who are actually in the Biden administration and the people who are actually in NATO actually are regarding Putin as this, like, psychotic, crazed, manic guy. That's not just propaganda, that they actually believe that, because they don't know anything about him, and they don't know anything about Russian society, and they don't know anything about the country that they're attempting to balkanize, right? And they're completely failing to recognize in any way whatsoever that it's their own arrogance and their own illiteracy and their own ignorance that's perpetuating this destruction. Because they've never been rewarded for knowing anything. They've always been rewarded for just saying, yes, sir. So they don't have to do a good job. They don't have to do anything. And now it's coming and it's biting them in the ass. Because the people who they're attempting to destroy are highly incentivized to know things, are highly incentivized to be knowledgeable about their enemy, are highly incentivized to actually be educated, to have a strong society, to ensure that the populace isn't falling into decay. They're highly incentivized because there's this enormous psychopath walking around on the world stage destroying countries, and to do anything less than erect massive security shields, huge economic systems, and to know everything that psychopath says, does, and thinks, to do anything less than that is to be fucking destroyed. So what we have is a world stage where there is a highly literate, extremely clever and resourceful group of people who are doing everything they can to survive against a big giant fucking monster with a club. And that's what's happening. Yeah. And, like, we're so stupid. Dismantle your manufacturing base? Are you fucking out of your fucking mind? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Imagine you were playing a game. Like a game like Crusader Kings or Civilization or any of this kind of stuff. Right? And your whole empire and your civilization for thousands of years, you're building up your productive capacity and your industry and all of this, right? You've got like an industrial zone, right? Where you're building workshops and you're manufacturing and all this kind of stuff. And then at one point came the option in the game for you to take your manufacturing sector, your industrial zone, right? Shut that down, build a new industrial zone in someone else's empire, right? In someone else's empire. And the reward for doing this was that a couple of your citizens would get a fucking shit ton of money. And then you would go, well, then I can use that money to build other things. Nah, they get the money. So what have you done? You've erected a little empire inside of your own borders. That's what you've actually done. Like, imagine you're playing a game like Civilization, and you do this. You transfer your manufacturing base over to someone else's empire, right? Giving them the industrial capacity that you now no longer have, right? And the reward for it is that some of the tiles in your area become owned by someone else. That's exactly what we've done. While walking around talking about how smart we are. Like, fuck, we're stupid. Like, fuck, we're stupid. The more I think about it, and the more I talk about it, and the more I investigate it, and the more I attempt to create new ways of communicating what it is we're doing and how it is we operate in the world stage, the fucking stupider we look. How stupid can you fucking be? We've not only empowered and created an economic giant in another empire, but all of the benefits for having done so go into the pockets of another entity that we've created that separated itself from us. Like, we are a failure. We have failed as a civilization, and the depression that we are about to plow ourselves into is going to be proof positive of that failure. We have to dismantle the system of capital. This is what it does. It only betrays people. It is not capable of doing anything other than betrayal. It betrays its own nations. It betrays its own people. And it does so for the benefit of literally no one whatsoever. Do you think Jeff Bezos' quality of life would be worse if he had $1 billion instead of $200 billion? No. It wouldn't change at all. And so a guy like Bezos gets to live in a society that's in decline and collapsing for nothing. For nothing. For no gain whatsoever. It's insanity. Isaac says, Putin said in 2018 that sanctions were good for them because it pushes them for more independent and will help develop their own technology and break away from Western dependency. He said bring them on, yeah. The West thinks Putin is bluffing. That's the thing. Like, it keeps happening. Putin will stand up and say, this is what we plan on. And the West goes, nah. Because they're too stupid to believe that another nation can actually have a plan, right? Because the Americans don't. Like, the Americans don't plan, right? The only time Americans actually get to planning is when it comes to, like, war, right? Then they're the greatest planners that ever lived, right? But outside of that, they don't plan shit. Like, it's all just it's just chaos. That's the free market that we're all supposed to be worshiping, right? And so when they see somebody stand up and go, we have a plan, and we're going to do this, this, and this, and we're going to protect ourselves from these sanctions, right? America goes, they can't possibly mean it. And even if they did mean it, so what? We're so big and powerful and good and awesome. We're the greatest people that ever lived in the history of mankind, right? American exceptionalism, God is on our side. We have the divine right of kings. We're the greatest people that ever lived. So even if they try, they're going to fail because we're so awesome. Like, this is the American ethos. USA! 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 Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. It's stupid. It's so fucking stupid. And it's backfiring and it's going to keep backfiring. It's just going to keep backfiring. Like, you ever met somebody, or have you ever been in the position where you say something stupid or you say something wrong, right, to somebody, and you try, and you realize it, right? You realize that you've said this stupid thing, and you've insulted them, right? And you try to change your position, or you try to fix it, right? So you keep talking, right? And so you just, but you can tell that as you keep talking, or as you keep doing something, or as you keep trying to resolve this, you just keep making it worse. You just keep making it worse, and it gets worse and worse and worse until eventually you just go like, oh my god, and you just like have to either leave the situation, or they leave the situation, or you just shut it all down and you're just like, I'm sorry, this is a disaster. This is a total fucking disaster. And you just admit that what's happened is wrong, and you just shut the fuck up. That's exactly what's happening to the U.S. empire. That it's first of all, it's never going to acknowledge that it's made the mistake, but it's made the mistake. And then it's just going to keep doubling down. And so the mistake is just going to get exponentially worse. It's just going to exponentially go worse and worse and worse over time. It's just going to constantly grow and grow in the disaster until finally America is forced into a position where it has to go, fuck off. This is fucking terrible. Like we can't continue this way, right? And that's not going to happen until the people have surrounded the halls of power, which, let's get to it. Out of curiosity, do you know where I can find an audiobook of Cotton is King? I do not. I assume it exists. I assume that like Audible would be your best bet, right? I'm going to warn you right now, dude. There are definitely chapters where it's like the book of Numbers in the Bible, where it's just like, from Tennessee, we got 1.4 million tons of cotton, which converts to 5.3 pounds per pound in the European standard, which means that over the course of one summer, one should anticipate an increase in profit margin by 438%. That 483% can be transferred on aggregate over the course of 43 weeks. Over the 3-week period, one can be assured that an increase in profits of 5.4% can be invested back into the portfolio of the slave trade, which will increase the amount of wealth that one can derive and one can anticipate to get by a factor of 3 over the course of a 10-year period. It's a lot like that. Yeah, I hope Russia captures me if NATO and Russia go to a full war. Dude, if NATO and Russia go to a full war, it's game over for humanity. Like, it's game over for humanity. Like, we're not going to survive it. This is what makes this moment so genuinely dangerous and so fucking stupid, right? Is that if, yeah, but Thomas Sowell says that slavery wasn't profitable. Yeah, well, that is an interesting thing to point out, is that slavery isn't profitable for the society, right? It doesn't profit the society to use slavery. But that's not the point of slavery. The point of slavery is to benefit a very small group of slave owners. That's the point of slavery. So if and the reason why slavery isn't profitable is because, for a society, is because you have slaves. Because the people who are living in slavery are living a shitty time. And the people who have to enforce that slavery are having a shitty time. And then you have all of these systems that are constantly around, constantly reinforcing this incredibly antagonistic way of living in the world, right? So it isn't profitable for a society, right? It is extremely profitable for the slave owners, right? So once again, Thomas Sowell doing what Thomas Sowell does best, and making the simple complex, and making things that are obvious obscure, right? That's what Thomas Sowell does. Like, Peterson does this too, right? All of the modern conservatives are doing this now, where they take something that is factually true, right? And it's like, you can see Pierre Poilievre doing this right now, right? You start with something that's fundamentally true, right? And then you digress in absurdism, and you just become an idiot about it. That's what they're all up to. So I am credible because I'm stating a fact that is real. And because that fact is real, that means that this is real too, when it isn't, ever. It's never the case. Yeah, doomsday clock reaches midnight if that happens. Yeah, I mean, like, the fact that anybody is talking about using nuclear bombs, like, these people are psychotic. Like, these people are actually psychotic. Like, if we start dropping nuclear bombs, it's over for us. Like, it's over. Like, you straight up, like, I'm saying this more and more these days, but, like, you don't need to follow the laws of a society that's acting this way, right? You don't need to follow the rules of a society that's suicidal like this. And if the society is genuinely saying we're going to nuke ourselves into extinction, you don't need to follow these rules. There are no rules. There's no laws. There's just your base survival, right? That's it, right? You don't need to respect these institutions. You don't need to follow what they have to say outside of their capacity to send thugs at you, right? That's it, right? That's it. And if they start dropping nukes, you just do what you want. For real. Like, for actual and for real. If they start dropping nukes, just do anything you want. There's no rules. There's no law. There's none. The fact that we still have these things should tell you how psychotic we are, right? There was a period of time where we were actually genuinely looking at one another, being like, maybe we should have less of these. Maybe we should get rid of some of these nukes. Like, why do we have these? Like, I understand that we were caught up in the hysteria of World War II, and in many ways, the nuclear bomb is what's responsible for sort of bringing an end to that kind of scale of warfare that we were experiencing. But their existence on the world stage now is their very existence is an existential threat. Like, the way that climate change is going now, if we set nukes off inside of this society, inside of this system right now as it stands, we're done. Like, we're done. Like, and no comeback. No comeback. Right? Yeah. See, no mouse would ever make a mousetrap, yet humans have made nukes. Yeah. I'm convinced now that the conservative, I assume you mean grift, is to lie by omission. Oh yeah. Well, what do you think they're doing with the CRT thing? The fight against CRT is a fight to lie by omission. That's what it is. To never actually teach your children about the history of slavery. Like, never teach them the truth. Just lie to them by omission. And so you have a culture that is, by its very definition, illiterate and do not understand what is happening in the world. Like, this happened to me with the genocide of the First Nations people in Canada, right? I was never taught that. I had to learn that later. I learned that later when I went to university, right? So, like, we're not teaching people the reality of what the empire does and how it operates, right? Yeah, you should always ask the question, what are they admitting? Yeah, because if you omit things, well, I mean, take a look at the Ukrainian war, right? If you omit the Donbass war and the coup, right? If you just omit the coup and omit the Donbass war, then you can essentially say what you like. You can essentially defend whatever position you like. Because you're not operating from a position of facts. Demand better, how you doing, bud? Good day to you. Good day to you. Ah, such a pleasure. Ugh. What a world we live in, man. What a strange place. Is there a CRT program in Canada? I don't know. I mean, we have been less... I mean, to me, the thing that's so fucked up about the whole CRT thing is that, like, CRT teaching is a university level thing, right? Even the proponents of CRT are like, yeah, we don't teach, like, we're not teaching, like, elementary school kids about this shit. Like, we're not sitting here being like time to teach critical race theory to a fucking fourth grader or something, right? That's not how it works. It is like a university level thing to teach people about critical analysis and race in regards to law, right? Like, that's what it is. And it's being used and scapegoated by people throughout southern states especially in order to, commit to book burning and shit. And they're doing big book banning campaigns and shit like this now. So it's not the same thing, right? Like, Canada doesn't have that. We don't have the big book banning campaigns. We don't have like, America, like, what's happening in Canada is we are kind of, we're moving to the right as like a defense mechanism, right? That we see that America is collapsing into fascism, right? We see it. It's obviously happening. And sort of as this defense mechanism, we've erected like a shimmer to look like fascism. But the citizens of Canada are not doing the same thing. We're not on the same level, right? We've got our little kind of pockets and things that are concerning that you should sort of look at. But it really is the difference between, like, oh, I see that you've got a bit of a rash here. Let's get some cream and put that on the rash. And like, oh, we've got to remove your arm. Like, your arm is gone. Like, we've got to get rid of that arm. And if we don't get rid of that arm, it's going to take over your body. It's going to get into your heart and it's going to kill you. Like, that's the difference, between what's happening. That's why all of the, like, crazed rhetoric surrounding Polyev about, oh, he's a far-right populist and he's appealing to the far-right and all this kind of stuff. I'm just kind of like, yeah, Canada's far-right is not America's far-right. Like, America's far-right is like our Conservative Party is basically the Democrats, right? Like, that, I think that is actually fundamentally true. We don't go, like, what's happening with the Republicans and what's happening on that side of the spectrum is like a whole other ball of wax. That America is collapsing into fascism because of its dedication. It's pure dedication to the death cult, to the principles of neoliberal free market capitalism, right? To the idea that everything should be a market and commodified and all this kind of stuff. And Canada is not immune to that, certainly, but we have had in our history people who have stood up and been like, yeah, okay, but like we should probably also have laws and stuff and regulations. Right, so we create a more regulatory capital. We've like during the 2008 financial collapse, Canada didn't really suffer so badly during that period of time because we had previously created regulatory laws in order to prevent those very collapses from happening in the first place. Whereas America was just like, the free market will decide, get rid of those. And so then the free market decided, and we saw what that looked like, right? So there's, so it's different. It's just different. And it's not to say we're immune, but like, if fascism overtakes Canada, it'll look different. It'll look different than this. Right? Which isn't to say that we're not like pro-imperialist and pro-colonial, because we definitely are that. For me, in my university class, there was never one class that... I'm just going to read this as you wrote it, bud. For me, in my university class, there was ever one class that, as ever, discussed indigenous issues, and it was taught by a native, of course. So I'm going to read that to say that you had a First Nations fellow teaching you indigenous issues. Because I think that's the way to do it. Like, I wouldn't... if I went to, like, an indigenous issues course and it was being taught by some, like, white dude, I would just walk out. I wouldn't do it. Straight up. I'm not going to take that seriously. Like, certainly not at a university. Right? Like, as a like straight white dude, like I feel like I can be an ally and I can talk about it, but I would never consider myself a teacher. I would never put myself in that position of being like I feel like I'm at best like a newsman. Like I can sort of just like hawk the issues and sort of bring things up and all of that. But the people who should be listened to and taken seriously on when it comes to Indigenous issues is absolutely the First Nations people themselves. Like that, and if you're gonna have like a professor who you're paying to actually teach a course in a school about First Nations issues and being a First Nations person, yeah, it should probably be that person, right? Yeah, what I'm saying is that there was only one course I could ever find that talked about Indigenous issues, and it was an Indigenous issues class. Yeah, I mean, it's in terms of our society, it's actually progressive that class even exists, right? And it's like, and you can see like how like women's studies or gender studies, right? As a program, how much that gets mocked and insulted, right? That there's this big movement going on right now. There's this big movement going on right now in trans communities and gay communities where people are just starting to say, like, look, what does this matter to you? Like, this pronouns game, right? That you guys are all losing your minds about. What does it actually matter? Like, how does it actually matter? And it is kind of like looking at people who are seeing kids being like groovy, and saying like, oh, I didn't talk about that like that way, groovy, blah. Like, it has that kind of a vibe about it, and it really is just happening because people are bigots. Very simply put. Oh yeah, we haven't done that today. Here's Mocked. Hope that vacation's going well for you, Mocked. Hope you're having a good one, bud. You never actually did tell me where you went. If you went anywhere. We got 8 people watching. I expect to see 8 numbers. I'm going for a 3. That's how I'm feeling. Here we go for today's number.
It's September 13th.
Oh, you went to the United States?
22.
Well.
10 balls. Each ball has a number.
Each ball has a number.
1 through 10.
Had to see the claps with your own eyes, eh?
Swirl
Swirl
the numbers.
the numbers. Pick a number. Here we go. We got a good array.
Today's number is
Mr. Moon, good to see you. 7. Hey, Mocked. Mr. Moon, coming in tight with the 7. Well, isn't that nice? I think this is probably the first win. Yeah, yes, Mr. Moon. I think that's the first win for you. Fantastic. And of course, Mocked, enjoying his vacation with a nice 7. May the energy of David Lynch carry into your lives. May something odd and esoteric occur that it requires much of your attention, and then upon its resolution makes you go, oh yeah, okay. Look at the Imperial March played in the background as he crossed the border. I can't take Darth Vader seriously as a villain anymore. His villain arc is like so fucking stupid. Like, what a dumbass villain arc. Just basically like a grumpy kid who is full of rage, gets basically everything fucking handed to him, becomes like a Jedi, and just essentially just loses his shit. Like, that's essentially the Anakin Skywalker story. He just essentially just loses his shit because he was destined to lose his shit. That's it. No big grand narrative, no betrayal, no twisting of the dagger, no sense of like righteousness, no sympathy. Like, the Darth Vader arc is literally just like crazy kid went crazy. That's it. That's his whole fucking arc. And it's just like, oh, okay. Like, why did we watch 3 movies for that? Yeah, the crazy kid, he just went crazy one time. And now he's crazy. No. Okay. Major hydraulic CRT is in Canada. And here's what's wrong with it by the Toronto Sun. Yeah. That's a great headline, Adam, because that's exactly right, dude. That's exactly right. We've got these fucking, like, we've got these propaganda papers that are just constantly trying to pull Canada into the muck, into the fucking fascist muck, right? Yeah, but his girlfriend was Portman, so that's impressive. Yeah, exactly. I mean, sure, we could do a rapid fire. We could do the rapid fire. Canada announces a national holiday to mark Queen Elizabeth's death. Doug Ford says no, because he's an idiot. Get rid of these. We read that. That was the statement of the thing. Read that. What was this? Oh, yeah, we read that. Yeah, half of Canadians believe private options will worsen the healthcare system. I'm blown away. It's only half. That to me is a major propaganda win. Like, I'll say it again. I said it earlier. I'll say it again. I think it's a major propaganda win that it's only half. Like, anything less than 80%, I consider to be like a real crisis number. Liberals unveil dental care details, boost of rent benefit, blah, 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 blah. Here's your pennies. Oh, this is from the Beaverton. Canadian government announces 10 days of mourning for the 45,000 Canadians who have died of COVID. Just kidding. It's for that one rich lady. Yeah. The Beaverton is actually hitting something here that I think is of interest and is of note, which is, like, we're putting in all of this energy and all of this discussion surrounding this, like, one rich lady when, like, we haven't actually had a moment of, like, reconciliation, of catharsis. We haven't actually had a catharsis moment about COVID. It's just something we all went through, and now we're being told, okay, get back to work. And it's kind of like, but we haven't even tried to come together as a people to try to build any kind of forgiveness or reconciliation or anything. Right? Good to see you, Matthias. And instead we're, like, having, like, national holidays for fucking, I don't give a shit about her. Like, she's on our money. Who cares? I don't fucking care about her at all. Anyway. Yeah. Just in case you didn't know, Britain's new Prime Minister is a corporate assassin who will destroy the British economy. I might actually just read this. You know what? Let's read this. This is going to be fun. There is a colossal humanitarian crisis brewing in the United Kingdom. Britain has the lowest corporate taxes on energy companies of any major economy. Shell and BP paid 0 corporate tax for the past 3 years, and accordingly, everyday Britons are currently facing the highest energy prices in Europe, with the average family being forced to pay a crushing $2,877 this year. This is like Dickensian shit right here, right? Like, doesn't it ever strike you? Doesn't it ever strike you that we're actually just, like, living in a Dickens novel? It feels this way. It's got this, like, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times sort of vibe about it. And we're all just, like, told to fucking deal with it. We're all just, like, sitting here being like, yep, it's just how it is. This is just capitalism. You know, you can't do anything about it, even though we've done things about it before, but we can't now. Capitalism. Pair that with the highest inflation rates in Europe, robbing the poor of 15% of their purchasing power. Despite having the 5th largest economy in the world, 14.5 million of Britain's 68 million inhabitants are in poverty, including 4.3 million children. And it's estimated that the energy price spike will drain millions of British families of their entire life savings. Thanks to Putin's war in Ukraine, energy companies like Shell and BP are forecasting record profits. 170 billion pounds in unexpected windfall profits over the next 2 years, on top of their expected $20 billion in profits. A smart, democratic, or moral government would know exactly what to do when faced with this situation. Tax back all 170 billion in surprise war profits for which these fossil fuel companies contributed no additional value, and get that money into the hands of Britain's poorest 10 million families. Then they'll spend that money on the things like heat and food, which will create jobs in the real economy, and all the money will end up back in the hands of the corporations anyway, but without millions of British human beings suffering first. Isn't that right, buddy? Isn't that right? But alas, the UK is run by anti-human corporatists. Enter the new Prime Minister, former Shell employee and full-blown corporate extremist, Liz Truss. In her first week at PM, Truss decided to declare her public allegiance to putting corporate profits above human life, health, well-being, and the real economy by declaring she would not tax all those war profiteering pounds. Instead, her plan is to, wait for it, borrow billions from banks and hand out £400 to poor households to quote-unquote help them make it through. In other words, she's killing two birds with one stone. Number one, she's protecting the war profits of her beloved corporate sponsors, the energy companies. Number two, she's providing her other corporate sponsors, massive private banks, with a new source of revenue, taxpayer-funded interest on the billions in subsidy loans that will eventually have to be paid back with usury. This is classic modern conservatism. But any classical economist like Adam Smith or David Ricardo or Henry George would point out the obvious. Liz Truss and her party aren't actually conservatives who want to conserve democracy and freedom and a fair rules market. They're corporatists who want to destroy the British nation for private profit. When the righteous increase, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people groan. Proverbs 29:2. Sadly, there wasn't a single member of Parliament who pointed out the obvious flaw in Truss's logic, mathematics, or morality. That's because the only people who are given a voice in politics are those who support the corporate privatization agenda. Truss insists we are in this situation because of Putin, but that's not true. Her Conservative Party has fought against energy independence via renewables for years. In fact, they banned onshore wind in 2015, which would have been enough to offset all Russian oil and gas imports. Truss repeatedly insists we can't tax our way to growth, but the Treasury's own estimates say energy companies will rob £170 billion in unexpected windfall profits from the working class over the next 2 years. Every pound is money not spent into the real economy to create jobs. Democracies absolutely can tax their way to growth. Truss vehemently claims taxing surplus windfall war profits will deter investment. Another lie. The major oil monopolies don't reinvest their windfall profits in creating jobs in the past year. They all gave dividends to rich investors and manipulated stock prices by executing share buybacks to the tunes of billions. Truss worried that if Britain taxed war profits, oil companies would stop investing in the UK altogether. But why would they do that? Even without their unexpected war windfall, corporate energy profits were still at all-time highs. Why would they walk away from tens of billions of profits? Moreover, even the CEO of BP said that they would cancel 0 projects if a war windfall tax came into effect. And what is monopoly investment anyway? Nothing more than for a way for elites to extract wealth from the real economy to the parasite anti-economy. Energy should be democratized, not corporatized. Truss, like all corporatists, is obsessed with supply-side economics. She insisted energy prices would come down if only her cons could slash environmental protections and allow her energy monopoly buddies to frack shale and drift offshore. Not only will it take years, if not a decade, for these filthy and dangerous new energy sources to reach British homes, but the total amount of new energy this would provide would only add a blip to the world's energy market, and energy monopolies don't give discounts against the global market price. Corporatists like trusts know that some of us democracy-loving people already know that governments don't provide anything to the people. Taxpayers provide 100% of everything in society, either in taxation or in interest-bearing debt, aka future taxation. Truss has chosen future taxation for the sake of present profits for private elites. All told, Liz Truss just pulled a Sri Lanka. She sided with elite billionaire corporations in a bid to engineer poverty for tens of millions of everyday working people in the real economy. It's all part of the bigger corporatist plan to ram humanity back into assetless feudalism and corporate serfdom. We all know how Sri Lanka's going. Utter poverty, suffering, and violent civil unrest. Even investors realize Liz Truss is a psychopath, hell-bent on destroying the real economy in favor of the corporate parasite anti-economy, with the currency markets immediately plunging the value of the pound to its lowest level since the last female corporatist prime minister, the working-class destroying Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher. Liz Truss has all but guaranteed Britain a long recession for years to come, and at least one winter of shivering misery for the sake of corporate war profiteers. Every single fake conservative who supports her should be run out of office. Yeah, don't like the high natural gas prices? Don't poke the bear. Good to see you grinning. This is the first time I've seen somebody describe what's going on as an anti-economy, and I rather like it. I'm going to steal this for myself. Because that's what it is, right? It's not an economy, it's an anti-economy, right? It's a parasite sucking value out of the real economy and creating an anti-economy, right? Where money is spent to have sex with like little girls in Jeffrey Epstein's island and stuff, right? Like, you know, normal shit. Yeah, they're talking about the energy problem in Europe. Huge energy crisis. Many European leaders are feeling pressure. Dude, there's going to be huge upheaval throughout Europe. Like, I'll be very surprised if many of these leaders make it through. Because, like, people aren't going to tolerate that. Like, if you literally cannot keep lights on, you're done. Dunzo finito. Like, it's some of the most basic shit imaginable, right? And people are literally going to be in their homes shivering, and they're going to know who to blame, and they'll be right? They'll be 100% correct when they say, like, yeah, we're going to blame the leader, because the leader's the one that's responsible. Good to see you, Matthias. Always good to see you, John. I believe you already can guess how I feel about a monarch's passing. I bet, Matthias, that you shed a little tear. I bet when you heard about the death of the Queen, you thought you stood up, you put your hand on your heart, and you sang a beautiful rendition of God Save the Queen, right? God save the Queen. And then you lit the candle on your little shrine that you've got made, right, of Elizabeth. Right, you took a Canadian $20 bill and you dabbed your tears away, right, and then put the bill right in the slot that you've got, right, and then you went and said your prayers to Jesus Christ and thought to yourself, Jesus, please give Liz a little kiss on the head for me, sincerely, Matthias. And then you went to bed and you had beautiful dreams of a society ruled forever by Queen Elizabeth II. That's what I assume happened. I don't know why I do that. It's so fucking stupid. I love it. I love doing it, though. After the royal passed, for some reason, my days have been better. I'm a little happier. No idea why. Yeah, you know what, man? It's a darkness has lifted. Right? Just a little, the world got a little bit lighter. Just a little, just like, right? The monarchy got a little weaker. Don't be too surprised if, like, Elizabeth's death creates, like, some independence campaigns, right? Like, there are going to be consequences for it. Like, it is just sort of this moment when people go, like, oh yeah, like, why do we give a shit about the monarchy? Like, why do we give a shit about the monarchy? What I'm really looking forward to, okay? This is the number one thing that I'm looking forward to, and it's coming, and we all know it's coming. They're going to spend $1 billion to bury Queen Elizabeth in the middle of this crisis that the current sitting government is perpetuating. Right? Like, it's coming. And I'm so looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to reading the article that reports on how much money they spent to bury the Queen. I'm looking forward to seeing the civil unrest that report creates. I'm looking forward to the potential for a outright civil revolution. I'm so looking forward to October 1st, which is the moment when all of these British citizens are going to say we're not paying our energy bill. I'm looking forward to a lot of that kind of stuff. Because what is happening in the United Kingdom, right, I think we should be paying very special attention to, because what happens there is what's going to happen here, right? That our psychotic, psychopathic elite are going to act exactly the same way, no differences. Our oil companies and all of this kind of stuff are going to act exactly the same way. We're going to go through exactly the same crisis because we're ruled by psychos who do not care about us whatsoever. And so my hope is that what we're going to see is a revolution in Britain, right? And that will say to us, oh, we can do that. And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell all of us, yeah, we should. We should absolutely do that. Like, we are ruled by total psychopaths who are hell-bent on the destruction of the species. And to believe anything short of that is to just fall into delusion. It's to just, you might as well believe that Santa Claus is real as far as I'm concerned. Like, if they were not psychopaths, they would be doing something. But they're not. So here we are. And what happens in Britain, it's going to come our way. Like, and in many places throughout the United States, you already see things. As eviction wave looms nationally, Twin Cities Democrats gut rent control. So literally, you are in the middle of a rent crisis, right? By December, the Census Bureau predicts that 3.8 million people will likely be evicted from their homes. Rents have increased 23% since July 2020, though last month the corporate media is bragging that it fell by 0.1%. Out-of-control inflation effectively amounts to an additional rent increase, and the billionaire class is eagerly trying to trigger another recession. Last fall, voters in the Twin Cities showed overwhelming support for rent control. In Minneapolis, voters passed a process to develop a strong rent control policy, though Mayor Frey ensured renters could not directly craft a proposal. In neighboring St. Paul, voters actually passed what amounts to the strongest rent control in the country, capping rent increases at 3%, and excluded developer-friendly loopholes like vacancy decontrol and exemptions. Within days after the election, Democratic Party politicians were already working with corporate landlords and big developers to gut these two proposals. In Minneapolis, City Council unanimously set up a work group, which allowed big developers to directly shape the future policy. In St. Paul, the City Council did a similar thing, except to retroactively review, read as watered down, the policy that passed by popular vote. Socialist Alternative Minnesota played a leading role in fighting for strong rent control alongside renters, unions, faith groups, working-class homeowners in a coalition called Minneapolis United for Rent Control. And etc., and etc., and etc. Like, this is the kind of shit that we are experiencing. Literally, we're experiencing an inflation crisis. We've got people saying that we're going to have 3.8 million people to be evicted, and we can't get fucking rent control. We're ruled by psychopaths. Like, very straightforwardly. The people who rule us are incapable of empathy, and get off on causing problems, right? That if you are miserable, they are happy. It's absolutely what's going on. Mock says Schultz spoke to Putin on the phone and said that any further annexations would not be recognized. Any further annexation sounds a lot like Schultz is realizing the mistake he made. As if Schultz has power. Like, that's the funny thing about Schultz and this whole WEF thing, right? Like, it's not a fucking instant. It has no power. Like, who gives a shit if Schultz talked to Putin on the phone and said any further? Like, who cares? If I was Putin, I would be like, click. I don't care. Fuck off. Like, who gives a shit what Schultz says? Like, I don't understand why any, like, I understand why there's this, like, conspiracy thing going on. But, like, if I'm, like, Justin Trudeau, or Joe Biden, or Donald Trump, or Pierre Poilievre, or any of these guys, I'm like, who gives a fuck? Like, he's just, like, old, demented grandpa who put together a little thing so that we can all come and talk to one another. And he's like, phoning Putin and wagging his dick around. And what's Putin going to be like? Oh, no! Schultz said if any further annexation... Click. Fuck off. I don't care. Like, I don't care at all. Like, if anything, that would just make me, as Putin, just, like, I would hang up the phone and I would be like, cool. Continue the war. Like, I would just encourage me. If a fucking loser like Schultz got me on the phone and said that shit to me. Like, it's just like... Yeah. Putin isn't going to care. Like, but that's just it. Like, Schultz is the only one that seems to actually care about the WEF. Like, it's like we're all just, like, placating Grandpa. We're all just being like, okay, Grandpa, you bet, right? Yeah, whatever you say, Grandpa. Like, yeah, the Great Reset, Grandpa, yeah, right? It just has that kind of vibe about it. And I'm like... And I guess it's important because if I found people who actually did think that Schultz was important, like if I found out that Justin Trudeau was actually like, and I think he has said this, so it makes me like really despise him. Like Justin Trudeau is like, Schultz is an important figure in our, like anybody who respects this guy at all, like at all, if you actually listen to this guy and think anything other than like, what a fucking dipshit this guy is, then I think you're a total fucking loser. Like, I can understand that you would listen to this guy and be like, oh yeah, okay, that's your opinion, right? And maybe you could even be neutral. Like, that I would respect. And I don't know, you could even sort of entertain the idea as the idea itself, right? But to just, like, listen to Schultz and be like, wow, Schultz thought that. How intriguing and interesting. Fuck you. Like, you're the biggest loser alive. There is no bigger loser than somebody who's listening to a person who has no power, who's just spending their own personal wealth in order to build this institution that has no merit or value, and think that somehow gives this guy credibility. Like, who gives a fuck? The conspiracy guys give a fuck, man. They really give a fuck about the WEF. You guys remember the deal that I made with chat? If we actually get like a WEF guy in here who's like really all about how important the WEF is, we got to take it seriously, okay? We can't just dismiss these guys. We got to be like, yeah, the WEF, dude. If you think that's crazy, wait until I start talking to you about the system of capital and how it's structured. That's the thing that kills me about the whole WEF conversation, dude. It's like, bro, if you think the WEF is crazy, wait until you hear about the system of ownership that the way the capital is structured, bro. You'll never believe it, right? Did you know that there are owners and people who are owned and that capitalism is a slave system? Did you know that, bro? Dude? Except I gotta be, like, not a dickhead about it when I say that kind of shit. Anyway, guys. We've reached it. We've done it. We've hit the end. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. The billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to ensure you never realize it. You just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.